The time is now for you and I. In the northeast of Africa, in the land of Egypt, Abraham was made rich. Father of nations was made rich. When the next generation was born, Isaac came down to Africa, and as a visitor he left rich. We're the land that blesses all. When the whole world was hungry, Mama Africa, you gave her your food. It was Jacob you made rich. It's the whole world you put a smile. This day we stand in the land that fed the whole world. This day we're saying no more hunger in Africa. Let's strive, let's get our tools, put our minds to work. Are you ready? Africa, are you ready? The time is now for Africa. The time is now for you and I. The time is now for Africa. The time is now, inspire Africa. When young boys were killed by sword, Joseph and Mary led away. Baby Jesus, they kept safe. They found refuge in Africa. When my Savior's time was nigh, Simon of Cyrene helped him. He helped him with the cross. There's a revival in Africa. Is it silver or gold or diamonds? Good weather, good people. Is it cocoa, vanilla or coffee? Life and light down in Africa. This day we stand in the land with all the minerals. This day we say we shall never lack, we have it all. Let's rise, let's get our tools, put our minds to work. Are you ready? Are you ready? Africa, are you ready? Africa. The time is now for Africa. The time is now for you. The time is now for you and I. Africa. The time is now. Can you see? Africa. The time is now. The time is now. Inspire Africa. You've been called. We're the Josephs of our time. Yeah, Mama, way. Since the world you rise and take our place. He created you. We're the Josephs of our time. Yeah, Mama, way. Yeah, Mama, way. Yeah, Mama, rise and take our place. Yeah, Mama, way. You've been called. You've been the Josephs of our time. Yeah, Mama, way. This is your time. We will rise and take our place. Yeah, Mama, way. We're the Josephs of our time. Yeah, Mama, way. Yeah, Mama, way. We will rise and take our place. Yeah, Mama, way. God is the land of Africa. In God we bless our Africa. Sweet motherland, yes, Africa. You'll always belong to Africa. Mawuko to side, yeah. Tangala kubela wamu, tunaomba. Sing this song, sing that song, Africa. The time is now, oh Africa. The time is now. He formed you and I. Just rise. The time is now, oh Africa. Your time is now. The time is now. Inspire Africa. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The time is now for Africa. The time is now for you and I. The time is now. Oh, Africa. The time is now for
Rise up, rise up, Africa, rise. Africa, rise. Hey. Oh, you You've been hard, your past's been hard. I know you're bitter, you let it linger. Years you've lost, pains you've stored. Do you not see it? God has a purpose for you. I am doing a new thing. See now it springs up, waves in the desert, streams in the wasteland, doing a new thing. See now it springs up right now, oh Africa, do you perceive it? What once was lost, God is restoring. Open your eyes now, receive His outpouring. Wisdom and might, power from on high. Do you not see it? God has revealed it to you. I am doing a new thing. See now it springs up, waves in the desert, streams in the wasteland, doing a new thing. See now it springs up right now, oh Africa, do you perceive it? Doing a new thing. See now it springs up, waves in the desert, streams in the wasteland, doing a new thing. See now it springs up right now, oh Africa, do you perceive it? He says, I know the plans I have for you, to give you hope, to prosper you, restore you, get ready, rise up, declares the Lord. I know the plans I have for you, to give you hope, to prosper you, restore you, get ready, rise up, declares the Lord. I know the plans I have for you, to give you hope, to prosper you, restore you, get ready, rise up, declares the Lord. Your maker, declares the Lord. Your savior, declares the Lord. Your helper, defender, strong tower in time of need, Africa. Yeah. See now it springs right now, right here. He's doing it for you. Rise up. See now it springs. Jehovah, He's doing it for you, Africa. Doing a new thing. Do you see it? It springs up, waves in the desert, streams in the wasteland, doing a new thing. See now it springs up right now, oh Africa. Perceive it. Yeah, come on. Eleri, Mungulondi, Emeri, Ayera. Egwoki, Africa, Elondi, Africa. This is your time, your moment. Hey, God has called you for this. Yeah, Africa, hey, Africa, rise.
The world is sinking, but Africa is rising. It's time for Africa to turn the tide of political conflict, economic uncertainty, and moral decadence. The time is now for Africa to arise and rebuild. Inspire E-Conference 2023 will give you the tools and strategies to be part of Africa's rebuild. Join us online this August from Monday the 7th to Saturday the 12th from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. East African Time as we gather the brightest minds across the continent to discuss the rebuilding of Africa. Book your slot today and be part of the movement that will change Africa forever. Africa, arise and build.
Good evening and welcome to day 4 of the summit. We've really had a powerful week, and we're looking forward to day 4. If you're joining us for the very first time, just indicate where you're joining us from. And if you still have your friends, family who are not part of this call, it's time for you to just call them in, share the links with them, let them be part of what is going to happen tonight. Tonight, it's one of my favorite subjects. We're talking people. I always say that you can have a very fancy business strategy, but if you don't have a proper people strategy, you will not be successful. So today we're talking about people. And we know that at the heart of God is all about people. So this for me ranks among my top subject. I'm really passionate about anybody who talks about the development of people. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We have a big lineup and strong lineup of practitioners, people who have done this for life and continue to do it. And so I want you to just be expectant. This, as you can already see, yesterday we were talking about specifically your wellness. Today, we're even going to equip you to be a better person in your workplace or in going about your business. So really, it is very personalized and directly going to impact your life as a participant in this call. And at the end of the call, we'll take a test to see if what I'm saying is actually right. So thank you for coming. Welcome to Inspire Summit. I've changed the name from conference to summit because this is how it kind of turned out. It's much bigger. It's not just a conference. We've attended conferences. This is a summit, and I hope you're enjoying yourself. Please greet us from everywhere. Okello, Grace from Rukonjiri, welcome. We can see you, and we really appreciate your spending time with us. I want to just spend 1 or 2 minutes to pray, and then I'll hand over to our moderator who I'll introduce to you just now. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you for the time that we've had together. Lord, at your heart is all about people. Lord, as we congregate tonight, as we come together to share thoughts and wisdom, I pray that you will give our speakers wisdom as they speak to us, that they will speak from their hearts. Lord, I pray that they will unlock things that are not seen, things that have been hidden from our eyes. Lord, I pray that you will enable them, equip them by your Spirit, I pray. Lord, for every person listening, I pray that you will give them attentiveness, you give them the ears to hear what your Spirit is going to say tonight. We thank you and we bless you, we honor you, we give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen. On behalf of my president, Paul Wafula, and the leadership of Inspire, welcome. Ben, good to see you, good to have you. Ben was my classmate at varsity. We studied together, and it's amazing to see what he's doing and the commitment that he has for this ministry or this platform. Ben, we appreciate you and we thank you for being with us all these years. There's not a single year that you've missed out being a moderator, and we just want to say thank you for putting aside everything else that you have to do, because I believe you know that this is important, and we just want to appreciate you for having time for us. This is what you do for a living, but you do this for the sake of the kingdom, and we just want to say thank you very much. Welcome, Ben. Ben is our moderator for tonight. Ben, the space is yours to take us forward.
Thank you very much, Emma. And I think you're leaving out some key details. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have finished university. So you are my backup plan always. And it's been interesting. One of the key sub-themes that's come out from this week, and we were chatting about it before we went live, has been the legacy of friendships. We've had lots of the panelists getting to interact with each other, coming from a very long distance in terms of their relationship in time. And it's going to be the same event today. But of course, not only do we celebrate old friendships, we celebrate new ones as well, and the kind of synergies that we need to take Africa to where it needs to go. Good evening to you and welcome to this edition of, as Emma mentioned, the Summit, Inspire E Conference and Summit for 2023. My name is Ben Mwene. I'm coming to you live from the highest point here in Kampala, Uganda. And it's good to see everyone who's joining us today. I see you, Samson Wandera, joining from my hometown, well, now home city, Nimbahara. Good to see you. I see Florence in Illinois, in the US. You're very welcome. Good to see you. I see someone in Accra, Akwaba. Good to see you. You're very welcome. Charles Muria in Iganga. Hi. I see David Asimwe in Dar es Salaam. Habari Mambo, good to see you. I see Pastor Edgar Nyabadza in Habaronde in Botswana, and so many other people in Lusaka. I see you, Nathan. Good to see you and very welcome. Pastor Jairus here in Kampala. Very, very welcome to you. As we get started, we usually want to try and find out from you, what are some of the things that have stood out for you so far? We are now on day 4. It's been a very jam-packed week so far. If you don't mind going into the chat room and just simply, just spend a minute to type between Monday and today, what is the one thing that you have heard that has triggered you, that is going to be a key takeaway already for you? Would love to be able to pick your mind on those. If you just don't, mind going into the chat room and just telling us what is the one thing so far that has kind of stood out for you. I know that many of us have learned about the alphabet mafia this week. We heard about that on Monday. We've been hearing about wellness, some very powerful gems that have come out through the last 3 days. So which one of those has caught your attention, even as we prepare to, dig into, like what Emma said, a very exciting conversation today about human resource and capital for Africa and what we need to do to build the appropriate human capital that we need for us as a continent as we arise and build. This is going to be something very important. Jacqueline, you're saying the key thing that stood out for you was, what are you building, and being able to count the cost for that. This is Esther. You're saying change begins with the church, and your connection with God and bringing his kingdom here on earth is very key. Absolutely spot on. True Beast, you're saying time to take Christ out of religious ghetto and take him to the communities. Yes, absolutely. As you can see, there's been lots and lots of powerful things coming in. Florence, you're reminding us about your learning about spiritual intelligence and how powerful it is, and indeed it is, being able to have some religious intelligence. So guess what? I want to encourage you to go into the chat, keep dropping those nuggets. There are some people who might be joining us today for the first time, and even that one pointer that you're sharing might actually make a difference for them to be able to go and pick back the recordings, which are available on YouTube and all other platforms where you can be able to go and pick them up. Vanessa Thomas, you're saying carrying the heart of God and marrying the land of Africa and protecting her. That's great. Samson, you're talking about God waiting for Africa to do and take ministry to the whole world. Are we ready? Well, that's the question we want to ask today, especially for our people. Are we ready indeed? Even as we say hi to you, James Ohito in London. Good to see you. So our discussion today is going to be about creating the human resource and the capital required to build Africa, and how appropriate human capital can be built for this continent. We've got a very powerful panel going to be sharing their insights, and we'll be giving you an opportunity to ask them questions as well, so they can sort of give you their experiences from what they have learned over the years. As we get started though, to talk about creating human resource and capital required to build this continent, I want to welcome our keynote for this evening, a very special guest for us, who is a leader in learning and development. She currently serves as the head of learning for Africa regions for Standard Bank. So technically, she's very well placed to talk about human capital for Africa. And in this role, she also assumes a membership role of the Standard Bank Group Learning Strategy Committee. Not only that, personally, she's a very strong believer in promoting human capital development and aligning this to Africa's growth, but also passionate about using her talents to serve in this area, whether it's one-on-one or through projects or organizations that are committed to Africa's growth, just as Standard Bank is. Most importantly, our keynote speaker today believes that God is the ruler of all mankind, and she believes that the Bible holds the truth and guidance for all who want to live the way that God designed for it to be. That said, She is qualified to share her thoughts with us today because she's very well educated with a Bachelor of Arts in Humanities from the University of Ghana. She's got a Master's in Philosophy and Development Studies from the University of Bergen in Norway, and also a certified leadership coach and career guidance consultant. I want you to welcome with me to Inspire E Conference for 2023, Mrs. Ivy Anand Mawuko, as she joins us this evening. Ivy, a very good evening to you. Good to see you. Hope you're well today. Looking bright. Hope you've had a wonderful day so far.
I have had a wonderful day, Ben, and I really look forward to Inspire Conference all the time. It's such a great honor to be invited to speak. So it's really a very special moment for me, and I'm so much looking forward to the panel discussions also with my friends and the new friends we are making through this conference. Thank you for having me, and I would straight on just start to share my screen shortly.
All right, thanks a lot, Ivy. We are looking forward excitedly with bated breath to hear your thoughts and experiences on what we can do about creating the human resource and capital required to build Africa. So take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And then I suppose you can see my screen, if it's
yes,
visible for everyone. Wonderful. And good evening from Accra. It's quite, we're in our rainy season, so we're grateful for the rains. And it also speaks to the goodness of God. Really grateful to be here, and where in different parts of the world where you're joining in. I am going to be talking about the human resource that Africa needs to build. And it's really aligned to the conference theme. And it's a topic that also is personally interesting for me. I'm trusting and praying that through the conversation we have, through the presentation, that God will stir up in your hearts some new thoughts and vision for Africa around human resource. We each can play a role in building Africa and this beautiful continent. So I've outlined a few things for us to look at. I will start by placing our attention on creating the human resource strategy, and then the elements for a build strategy. We'll look at career by design, and then I'll leave you with some homework, some call to action. Thank you. Some call to action that you can start to think about as we progress. So when you talk about, and then I'm not sure if my slides are moving. Would you be able to tell if it's moving?
We are at the outline slides. I'm hoping that's where you want it to be.
Okay, I actually wanted to move, and I think it's frozen a little bit. I'll stop sharing and then I'll reshare. Pardon me for that. I'll stop sharing and then I'll reshare.
No problem. It's a wonderful thing, this technology, isn't it? It can do things to you when you least expect it to.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's all good. We learn through that. We learn to adjust, and I think people are naturally forgiving as well. So we thank God for that grace, because it's something that I noticed happen a lot more these days. When you least expect it, it shows up. But generally, people are quite forgiving, and we're grateful for that. It will come up shortly, just getting it through. Thank you. Okay. There we go. I think it should have come up now. And
yeah, we can see the slide now.
Super. Thank God for that. Creating the human resources and capital required for Africa is what we're going to be talking about, and I would put it in slide mode. I think there's a slight delay in the response, but we will get there. Thank you for your patience. Wonderful. Okay, beautiful. Now I feel like I'm in control now, by God's grace.
Are you ever though?
Okay, so I think I started off really by looking at what is the strategy for human resource for Africa, and I think that is where I'd like to start off the conversation, Ben. And this is a very popular framework that usually it's very common in a human resource practice, that when you are thinking of human resource, you can either build, you can buy, or you can borrow. And this is a framework that I believe also can hold true for Africa as a continent, that if you look at the continent's needs for human resources, we can either buy, we can build our own human resource, or we can borrow. And I think in alignment with the conference spirit and theme, I'll dwell a little bit more around the build strategy, because that's what we really are aspiring towards. And if you look at the build strategy, it's really basically developing the human resource internally within Africa, or even at country level, or within organizations or businesses. So where you have scarcity or you need skilled labor to do work, your strategy would be, let's build it internally, let's train people, let's develop people, and then let us redeploy them within the organization. You could also decide to use a buy approach, which is that you recruit from the outside market. So you are not building, but you're buying the talent or human resources you need. And even as a continent, we know that there have been many times where we've had the importation of human resources to work for us in Africa, or to do work in Africa. And it's a strategy that we could use. And then we could borrow, and borrowing would be seasonal human resource, temporary contractors, and freelancers. So they come in at short term, do a piece of work, and then they go away. You borrow them because they have a particular skill, or that is a strategy that you want to use. And each of these elements will have some cost implication. And for us as a continent, when you look at Africa and what we need, we could actually leverage of this model to say, do we build, do we buy, or do we borrow? And I think that if you again keep this framework in mind and then look into Africa's challenges, you will notice that in the various sectors that hold opportunities for Africa's growth, we need deep mastery in these sectors of growth. If you take health or agriculture, housing, energy, infrastructure, education, or industry, we don't only need beginner's knowledge or skill, we really need deep mastery. Meaning that we need the best human resource in these sectors that hold massive opportunities for Africa's transformation and growth. And I think if you look at what is also currently running and very top of mind is applied technology. Technology as a means, not the end in itself. Applying technology to these growth opportunities that Africa has. And there are many more that we can think about. So in your country or in your business, or if you have an opportunity to start something, really think about what are the levels of mastery that we require. And I think I can speak for Africa. We need really high, top-notch human resource to solve Africa's problems. And I'd like you to keep that in mind as we travel through. But you know, Ben, my inspiration has always been the Bible, and unashamedly, I draw so much wisdom from God's word. I think that if you take the Bible away from me, I'll cease to function. I draw everything that I'm able to do. It's really linked back to what's God's word, because that's a source of wisdom. So I looked up some of the biblical view around human resource strategy that worked. And I think we can learn from that as we build and educate ourselves around Africa's human resource and human capital. And if you look at the borrow strategy, you look at it from 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 1 to 17. Solomon was tasked by David, his father, to build the temple for God, to build the house of God, if you can put it that way. And I would just want to read for you and highlight a few pointers that builds on this point. I'll start from 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 1 to 17, and I'll read some key portions. The Bible says that now Solomon decided to build a house for the name of the Lord and a royal palace for himself. So Solomon assigned 70,000 men to carry loads and 80,000 men to quarry stone in the mountains and 3,600 to supervise them, so like managers. Then Solomon sent word to Hiram, the king of Tyre, saying, as you dealt with David, my father, and sent him cedars to build him a house to dwell in, so do for me. Behold, I'm about to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, dedicating it to him, to burn fragrant incense before him, and to set out the showbread continually, and to offer burnt offerings morning and evening, on Sabbaths and on new moons and on the appointed feasts of the Lord our God, this being required forever in Israel. The house which I'm about to build will be great, for greater is our God than all the gods. But who is able to build a house for him? For the heavens and the highest heavens cannot contain him. So who am I that I should build a house for him, except to burn incense before him? Now this is his request. Now send me a skilled man to work in gold, silver, brass, and iron, and in purple, crimson, and violet fabrics, and who knows how to make engravings, to work with the skilled men whom I have in Judah and Jerusalem, whom David my father provided. And I'll skip to verse 13. So this was the response of King Hiram. He says, now I'm sending Hiram Abi, a skilled man, endowed with understanding, the son of a Danite woman and a Tyrian father, who knows how to work in gold, silver, bronze, iron, stone, wood, and in purple, violet, linen, crimson fabrics, and who knows how to make all kinds of engravings and to execute any design which may be assigned to him, to work with your skilled men and with those of my Lord David, your father. And then finally, the verse 17 says, Solomon numbered all the aliens or the foreigners who were in the land of Israel, following the census which his father David had taken. And 153,600 were found. He appointed 70,000 of them to carry loads and 80,000 to quarry stones in the mountains, and 3,600 supervisors to make the people work. I mean, where am I getting to with this? I think the point here is that Solomon imported talent. He pays for them, if you read the entire chapter. And then King Hiram says, they will help your men. Borrow strategy must have a purpose of transfer of skill, because King Solomon didn't have these skills when he was built. He didn't have men who had these skills. So he borrowed the skill. And in borrowing them, there was this exchange of ideas. It's your men will work with my men, and then they will work together. This is somebody who is skilled in something that I do not have. And I thought it's such an inspiration to know that you can set out a strategy to borrow human resource as a way of growing Africa's continent, as one way. Another strategy I like to share about with a biblical view is the buy strategy. And I think that we can also look at Joseph, who was a slave imprisoned in Egypt, who rose to become a chancellor in a foreign land and lived there for a long period of time. King Pharaoh wanted someone who was endowed with the wisdom of God, whom the Spirit of God dwelled, but who is able to solve the impending famine situation that Egypt was going to encounter. We know that because of Joseph's execution and advanced knowledge in what he had, he was able to save not only Egypt, but the neighboring towns as well. So what it means is that, and Joseph, by the way, is not even a native. So it's almost like being a Ugandan or Ghanaian or Nigerian or wherever you are, but working in a foreign land because of what you possess. And then your skills are bought to deliver on what is required. And then the third one is the build strategy, also taking inspiration from the Bible. Jesus Christ is a perfect example. He chose 12 men and built them and commanded them to build others as a lifetime occupation. Sorry. So the model Jesus had was, he first focused on identifying the human resource needs. He selected men willing to learn. He focused on a few. He did not neglect the masses. He stayed with the 12. He taught them. They called him master. He required their obedience. He mentored and coached. He demonstrated and observed. He demonstrated and they observed him. He gave them multi-geographical exposure. He actually exposed them to complex situations. They watched him answer tough questions. They watched his character. They saw him at work. They were observing him until the time when he knew that they had been well built. he commissioned them and said, go and make disciples of many nations. And all the 3 years that Jesus Christ had, he stayed close to the 12. Building the human resource for multiplication was his strategy. That was Jesus's goal. He knew that he had a big task. He cast the vision, he chose them, and he trained them. And I think that in looking at what our conference theme is about, is Arise and Build for Africa, I believe that therefore the model around build will be where I like to emphasize a lot more. Not to say that we can't borrow or we cannot buy, but we've got so much human resource available in Africa. I think that we have underscored many times that there's a young population in Africa, and the unemployment rate is also very high. So it really requires a build strategy where we build the human resource required for this continent's growth and advancement. And we can take inspiration from the methods that have worked. Jesus's method did work. I think if you look again, he had a curriculum for the 12, he educated them, and he mentored and coached, and he built in practical application when he sent them out in twos to say, now that you've watched me do what I've done and I've taught you, go and now do something. And then they come back and they said, oh, this is what is the account. They come with very challenging encounters on the field. He listens, he guides, and he really prepares them. At some point, he was not on the scene, but the work continues. And he charged them that this model of building the human resource is what really works. Continue to make disciples. And interestingly, the term disciple means a learner, a student, a pupil, not a teacher. We will be lifelong learners who are in Christ. We will never stop learning. Even the best of us are still learners. So therefore, in building onto this further and proposing a model for building human resource in Africa, it will be the big emphasis will be on education. Educate. I shared a slight conversation with my leader, and I said, you cannot coach someone to become a medical doctor. They have to go to school. Even if they work with the best coach and mentor, they will be required to have the discipline and the science around the occupation. So education has a place in how we grew the continent of Africa. Educated, really having solid, strong education that provides the foundation. But education alone is not enough. It should be backed by coaching and mentoring. And that was the example that was used by Christ, that he taught, he guided, he was available, he stayed close and guided in the process of growing and building the human resource. And then also having the opportunity to practice what has been passed on to you. So imagine a doctor who never works on a patient or a client, then we would not be very comfortable with this person. If I went to the hospital with my mom and the doctor told me, I've just came back from school, this is the first time I'm going to deal with this case. However great his qualification or her qualifications might be, I would be a little bit doubtful and worried. But anytime you go, you say, look, this is not the first case I'm dealing with. I've had so many cases of this nature, and these are some of the possibilities. It gives you that confidence that this person knows what they're doing. So that combination is what Africa needs. I think that as a continent, we would know that we are very big on education, and there are these untapped opportunities to go down into coaching and mentoring and providing the practical exposure for our human resource. And to place these dimensions on us, even at the national level, we can begin to look at the build strategy to say, what is the plan that we have for a nation, for our country, for a continent? And it starts with casting the vision of what we need. And data will support to say, I think that Africa needs 50,000 doctors, so Africa needs 30,000 engineers, or Africa needs 50,000 teachers who can do this. Cast that vision for Africa. We cast that vision for countries. We cast this vision for organizations, and we cast this vision for our businesses. As a nation, I believe that as a continent, and we can begin to look at how do we project our human resource needs, and what numbers are we playing with to be able to plan carefully for this to happen. And so we would say we need X number of agribusiness skilled workforce in Africa to get us out of food insecurity. I think one key thing is also beyond the training or development is to deploy them into the sectors that are needed. So we are not creating a pipeline of unemployment, but once we are clear that this is a human resource we need and this is the job that needs to be done, then we deploy them into the sectors that we really want the solution for. I also think that brain drain is a scarcity mindset, and I've got a different take on that. The reason why I say that is that I think brain drain is when we either export our talent and people say, oh, if there's brain drain in Africa. I think it's a scarcity mindset. If we have few doctors and they leave, then there's a brain drain. But if we have abundance and we plan for abundance to say, this is how many doctors we need, and we put in the right systems in place, importation or exporting our talent will not be such a big deal. That's my view. And I often think that I've got opportunities, I had opportunities to work outside my country, and I don't think it was a brain drain. I got so much in return as a result. So it's really to now challenge some of these narratives to say, perhaps it's because we have them in such few numbers. I think one key thing also at the national level to consider will be professionalization of our informal sector. And it's also because the majority of our human resource needs are within the informal sector. And it's left a little bit untouched and not providing the right qualification that is needed. So that also is an area at the national level when we are thinking of a build strategy. These are some elements that almost provide some food for thinking. I think that if you look at the current conversations that India has provided and supplied us with most of the STEM jobs that we need globally. And I think that when you look at the fact that they're doing that and able to do that, it wasn't something that was planned today. It was a seed that was planted 50, 100 years ago, and now they are enjoying the fruits. So for Africa's human resource to unlock the growth of this continent, then we need to start now if you want to reap into 5, 10, 20 years from now. Whatever we envision and do now at the national level, at the AU level, that is what will give us the outcome in 10, 50, or 20 years and more. I think within the church also, we really have an opportunity to contribute to the build strategy for Africa's growth. And it starts with empowering Christian professionals to mentor and coach others. Because they are Christian professionals, they've got the discipline in place already in terms of their occupation. But coaching and mentoring is required. And it's not just, the whole concept of coaching and mentoring was challenged for me when I look at the Jesus model. He went to look for people to say, come follow me. I will make you fishers of men. He called out the 12 and called them in. So for mentorship to work, it requires a leader to go look for individuals that you say, come follow me and let's work this out. This is what I'm going to be teaching you. I think those mentoring programs that requires the leader looking for people to teach have more success rates than vice versa. And I'm not against young people saying, can you mentor me? I'm just saying that what has worked that we've seen in the Bible and that has really proven to work has been that you look for people and you look out for people that you can impact and help. Of course, there are others that will walk up to you, and we see that example in Christ. Some came to say, I want to follow you. He gave them the conditions for following him, and they never came back to him. They found it a bit too much. So then it's also, sometimes when you say, I want you to mentor me, be very clear around what it requires. Be interested in those areas that hold career prospects for young Africans. I would say the church must be interested in that as well. And then again, looking at leaders, we want to look out for people we can teach. I think if each one of us take one person and disciple them thoroughly, and they become so good that their family life is impacted, their occupation is impacted, their relationship with God is impacted, and we commission them to go do same for another person, there will be exponential growth in Africa. And that model works. Christ focused on a few because he could then pour into them. He did focus on the masses because sometimes you go to do these kinds of conferences and programs, but he focused on a few also to say, I charge you, now that you have seen what I've done for you, go look for one more person and pour into them exactly what I've taught you. So I think that there are levels of building the human resource right at the national level, within the church, and also as individuals. I just want to continue the conversation further. Just a little bit of a delay in moving the slides, but I think it's going to come. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, it's working now. So I turn into the two key pillars that I would say that in building a human resource, we need to pay attention to. I'll just skip a bit, but I'll speak to it. It's got to do with competence and character. So once we have the build strategy, these two pillars, I mean, if you look at any solid house, there'll be two pillars or pillars that hold the building together. And there are two key pillars that I believe are key in how we grow and develop people in Africa. And I think I'll just want to speak to the two of them shortly. Okay, just to go back to the slide. It's jumping a little bit, but we are safe. Okay, so these two pillars I talk about is character and competence. Africa needs skillful workforce, but that's not enough. I mean, having trained professionals that can do the job technically is not enough. Stephen Covey says that he's convinced that 90% of failures in life are character failures and not ability failures. So when you look at our build strategy for Africa's development, there are two key things that we need to anchor on. The first one is, yes, we will build people that can do the work and have the competence to do it. But we must also focus on the second pillar. I think I call it the most important pillar, the pillar of character. And he goes on to say that most of the challenges that we've had in Africa, and if you type anything now on the on Google to say corruption, all the stories that you would get about corruption will be pointing to Africa. And most of the problems we have in Africa, majority we can conclude are not so much competence issues. Some of them are, but majority tends to be character-based issue. And I don't want to reduce it to an African problem. I think that is generally the condition of man's heart. And we are not looking at character as the most important thing. It's a combination of both character and building for skill. So if you have a human resource, where the character is low and the skill is low, you certainly know that there's very little you can do with this group of people. But you could also be building where there are individuals whose character is low, but they've got high skills. And even then, I mean, you've got very technically sound people who lack the character. That can also be a challenge. We need both in the right measure. You might also have people with high character, but low skills. We don't also want that either. Where we are looking for in building Africa's human resource is building for people of high character and people of high skill. And those are the two pillars that hold for how we grow and build our human resource in Africa. Nelson Mandela puts it in a much better way as well. And he says that we need a good head and a good heart. And that is a formidable combination for our human resource strategy in Africa. So we will build for both. And skill, of course, can be learned. In fact, the World Economic Forum have just put up some research finding to say that you can build skill within 1 to 4 months. And they're talking about skills that generally people don't even have a background in. Once you can read and write and have some basic requisites, literacy and numeracy, some of the skills can be built within 1 month to 4 months. And there's abundance of resources to build these skills. So skills can be learned, and of course it can be improved by practice. Now, character is developed over time. You cannot build character in 1 month. It's a lifelong pursuit. And yet, in looking at the human resource opportunities for Africa, we need to bring both together. We're building people who are highly skilled and people who have high character as well. So this is some of the top 10 skills that certainly will interest all of us to say. They've done the research work to say the problem-solving skills are required today, self-management skills are required, working with people, technology use and development are required. And they go on to say the number of months that you can build these skills, like I said, it's not that long. You can actually build skills if you're very dedicated. But of course, it takes a lifetime to build character. And I think that if we were to recommend the future of our human resource strategy for Africa, is to build Africans with character. That wherever we are in the world, that we will show up as people with character. And your character will be tested. And it is in the test that you will say that I am a person of character. I just want you to pause and think about it for a minute. That in Africa, our future and the future of this wonderful continent hinges on a human resource framework built on competence and on character. And in the few slides that I have to share, I thought I would focus on us as individuals. And this supposes that this is something that somebody does onto us. So human resource strategies are usually engineered by countries, nations. It can be engineered by organizations. It can be engineered by businesses. But what about us as individuals? What do we do? What is our role in ensuring that we are also ready and we've built the key dimensions that will enable us to become really solid professionals of highly competent and also with good character or high character. And I think it goes back to looking at work or career as a purpose rather than something that fulfills an immediate need. And in looking at your work and what you do and what your calling is and what you're designed for, all of us on this call have been designed for very different things. And it is okay, because there is dignity in labor. But for a very long time, I think that if you ask any African and the chart tells you that I want to be a dancer, they will bow down their heads to say, after all the school fees we've paid and so much money we've spent on you, you want to dance? Or I want to play a musical instrument for a living. They said you would go hungry. So we have actually restricted the possibilities of what holds the space for a breakthrough in people's career, able to unleash themselves for the prosperity of this nation. And I challenge all of us to think about, what has God designed you for? What is your personality? And this is for us. We have this in our space. The earlier points I've made so far hinges that somebody designs that strategy and makes it work. But this is for us as individuals to say, how has God created me? How am I naturally gifted? That's your personality. Your personality is not determined by your parents. Our personality is determined by God. Some of us are introverts, extroverts. Some of us are unstructured, others are structured. Some are compassionate, others are detached. Whatever personality type you have, there is a role that can play or enable us to solve problems in Africa. And it's important to know that, because sometimes people are in jobs, they've got the training, they are people of good character, but they just feel like I'm a round peg in a square hole. I just feel that I'm not connected to what I'm doing. And I think it's important to look at, in choosing your career or in allowing yourself to go through this education, preparing you to contribute to solving Africa's problems, is also to take a look at your personality. How do I naturally respond? And what are the career interests that throws up for me? Another key dimension I'd like you to think about is your vocational interest. What am I interested in doing? And I happen to have had a conversation with a banker And we had an assessment around her career choices, and she had an MBA in finance. And the assessment revealed that she was actually a clothing designer. So I asked her, what are you doing with that? This is what you really want to do. And it must be fulfilling. It must pay the bills as well. And she says, look, when I'm bored, I just pick my pad, and then I just sketch clothes, and my parents sew it. My mom sews it. So I said, why can't you? She says, my mom and my parents will kill me because they paid so much for my MBA finance. I have to work in the bank. And I'm just bringing this out because to break through as a continent, we need to challenge those self-limiting beliefs that have been passed on to us. If you look at Solomon's strategy, he was not just looking for labor, he was looking for skilled labor. And skill is a function of interest. Because you've got to be at it for a very long time to become so good in it. But if you're bored doing it, then that skill and excellence will not show up. And I think that's where the challenge also has been for many young Africans. So the question to you, therefore, is, what is your vocational interest? And if you really, are you living the dreams of your parents, or this is something else you would be doing? I recently met a medical doctor, and she said, I did medicine because my parents wanted me to do medicine. And I actually want to be an auditor. And I spoke to my uncle because I know that it's safe to speak to him. And I've joined a company's graduate program to start all over again. Medical doctor, parents' dreams, but I'm talking about you. What is your Africa? This continent needs people who are interested in solving problems and not who have been told to do this discipline without any conversations around, is this of interest for you? Because I just want to underscore and repeat myself again that if it is not of interest, then deep mastery will not happen. I think another key point I'd like you to think about is skill and ability. And each one of us on this call is skillful and naturally gifted to do something. And that's where we must start off from. I can do this. I have the ability to do this. I'm naturally good at this. And of course, your own values. What you value in your work and in life plays a critical role in becoming that skillful employee or a skillful person that could be a big catalyst for Africa's growth. Your life values, your work outcome values, your work environment values do matter. I'll move on further to say that sometimes when you position these points, people say, look, Ivy, we have to put food on the table. If I'm passionate about music, how am I going to pay my children's school fees? And how am I going to put food on the table? Passion alone doesn't pay the bill. And that's absolutely right. I think when you're looking at the framework, a personal framework for growing your own competence and character, it's important to look at what you love, what pays well, and what you're good at. Because if you take the combination of what you love and what pays well, you don't have the skills to do it. So that's just daydreaming. So I'd love to be this kind of person, but you don't have the skill for it. So you could love something and you know that it pays well, but you're not able to do it because you haven't built that skill that is required to do that job. You could also be good at what you currently are doing and it pays you well, but you really don't love it. So then you're rich but bored. You could also be doing what you love and what you're good at, but it doesn't pay well, so you're happy but poor. And work must have economic value. It's not You know, sometimes when you talk about do what you love, people say, oh, you're going to be poor because no. What you love must have economic value. It must have a social value, and it must have a spiritual value. So it's not one against the other. It's a combination of building the skill, loving what you do, and also it's paying well, it pays well. If you look at Solomon when he was importing talent from the king of Tyre, he really negotiated for very good terms. He says, I'll pay them this. I will give them extra. So being paid well or looking for an occupation that rewards you over time, it's really not bad. It's not unspiritual. Okay. So I'm just pointing this out so that we look at it all from different dimensions. Like some of the career struggles that people have. This was a research work done by Crown Financial Ministries, and they said 50% of all men and women who went to work this morning feel they are in the wrong career field. And 52% of IT workers would rate doing something in liberal arts. And tens of millions of people feel like square pegs in round holes when it comes to work and careers, because, like I said, maybe it wasn't a choice that was made. So our human resource strategy for Africa's growth and breakthrough needs to follow a reliable process for career choices for people. So most are making choices based on the criteria that is unsound and will yield fruits of discontent. So you might find very seasoned professionals, but I said they could be rich and bored, or they could be happy and poor. We need to look at the three key dimensions: that it pays well, you love it, and you are good at it, and not just know how to do it, but can do it and do it so well. I think that it's important to further look at some of the faulty foundations for career decision-making largely. Sometimes people also take the easiest or first jobs offered, and it's not a career, it becomes then a job, because a job is something you do that has an immediate outcome. So most of us, when we're going to school outside our countries, we did some odd jobs because we wanted to earn extra income to be able to send back home. Okay, those are jobs. And a career, it's a much more aligned to your purpose. So you could have a job, but it's not a career. And sometimes there's that challenge of taking the easiest or first job offered, even when you think you're pursuing your career. So this is just what is at hand. Maybe you can take it temporarily, but really coming to the tent to say, what have I been designed for that I will not get bored doing it, to become so skillful at it, really has to be something that is deeply reflecting what you've been designed and how God designed you. Sometimes people also have taken jobs because money is the main motivator. This is a well-paying job, but I don't really like it. I'll stick around and do it. Sometimes the job title or company prestige can also be attractive for people. And so they might be the job title is quite interesting. I like the sound of the title. I'll take it. Or sometimes just the security, power, and control can also be influencing those career choices as well. Maybe friends working for the organization, seeking only occupation that fall into the hot job category: doctor, nurse, engineer, pilot. But the other jobs, the dignity of labor is segmented in Africa. And we want to push back that. That's why, I mean, back in the days when we were kids, when you did something wrong, they send you to the farm to weed. So the mindset is that now it's changing though. There's an emerging young people that are looking at farming as a business and not as labor. It's because the jobs, there's dignity in labor. And that's something I'd like you to think about and really look at your kids. Maybe the next artist that the world will celebrate is sitting right here, or maybe at home, your child. Maybe the best chef that the world is yet to hear about, that will change the narrative around food. It's in Africa. If we don't expand the bandwidth of jobs and we leave it to just a few hot jobs, this continent will not explode in the opportunities that hold for us. It's changing, but we really want to accelerate that change. I think that I also talked about students following their parents' footsteps, students filling parents' dreams and aspirations, and taking the job just because you can do it. Those are some of the faulty foundations that we need to challenge in Africa. I think in conclusion, I would say that I've talked about the build, borrow, buy strategy for human resource in Africa. And I like to say that I put a little bit more emphasis on the build strategy because we've got the people in Africa. We would certainly have occasions where we borrow the human resource because we need it to solve a particular need that we don't have the skill internally. That's okay. And it will be for a short term. And even in that strategy, it's important to underscore the transfer of skills, that we are deliberate to say you're here for a short term, but you're going to work with our people, like King Solomon and King Harold discussed. And then even in buying, we won't buy the human resource. Africa has been blessed with some of the best brains that are not necessarily natives of Africans, but have contributed massively to the development of this continent. So I'm all for that. And I think that that should be encouraged and allowed. The mobility of talent is the new order. But we need to be very deliberate in accelerating the build strategy for this continent. I think in the build strategy, I've talked about the role of education, mentoring and coaching, and practical application. I've also talked about 2 strategic pillars on which we can build our strategy for how we grow our people. And that has to do with competence and character. And then I've talked about what does it mean for you as an individual in terms of your career choices, i.e., that if you take a careful reflection of what you're doing now, would you say that I really love what I'm doing, it pays well, and I'm good at it? And that's something to really think about. I think that in conclusion, the call to action for us would be 1. All Africans are lifelong learners. We will be learning for the rest of our time because there's no end to learning. So I want to challenge you and ask you, what are some of the learning goals you want to set for the rest of the year? It might be that if you look at the 3 circles, I love it, I'm good at it, it pays well. Maybe you could be working on, I'm good at it. There's some aspects that if you build that additional skill, it would actually pay well. I don't know, it could also be just igniting the passion again and building on some character challenges that humans have so that you've got the right balance of being a person of competence and character. Whatever the goals might be, we're constantly transforming and we are all work in progress. So set a goal for yourself. And then the second call to action will be, who are you following to learn from? I think if you look at the build strategy of our Master Jesus Christ, he called people to follow him. So who are you following? Who are you learning from? Who is teaching you stuff that will help you? Who is teaching you so that you can go and multiply? And who is following you for learning? Who is choosing you to say, I will follow you? Teach me. Who are you following and who is following you? And these are things that are not to be casual or taken lightly. I think these are deep moments to make key decisions. It hit me so strongly lately to say, in the work that I do, who can I teach everything that I know to? And I struggled a bit. And I started to pray about it to say, who can I teach everything that I know? Because that's what Christ did. He taught them everything that he knew. And then he said to them that you will do far more than I did. And I honestly started to pray. And I asked the Lord, who do I pour everything that I know into and teach? And it is a lifetime commitment. And when you have taught, you wean them off to go teach someone. And that's how Africa's breakthrough will evolve. We will pray for our country leaders to do the right things and invest in human resources. We will pray for more organizations that are not only seeking economic benefits, but also interested in growing Africa as a continent. We will pray for more of such organizations. We will also pray for the church to step in the human resource strategy. But we individually will also play a part and make those changes. Just who am I following? And who am I going to be teaching? Not many people, few, and you stay committed as Christ did. God bless you for your patience, especially when the slides were challenging me at the beginning. Thank you for being merciful. And I pray that this has blessed you, and we're going to have friends that we will talk further and take some of the questions you have. God bless you. Over to you, Ben.
No, God bless you. What an incredible presentation, Ivy. I mean, that was just absolutely mind-boggling. So much to glean off of, so much to talk about. I don't even know where to start. I think the first question I had for you, I guess, was echoed by a comment that was put in our chat by Angela, who was saying that at this rate, she really feels like we should rewind the clock and start afresh. She's been reminded very quickly that we've moved on now. I think it was Angelina was saying, it's too late, now we must move on. But I think you touched on it by talking about the fact that we are lifelong learners, and therefore it's never too late to start. And I guess I'll be coming back to you on that to talk about the person who is 50 years old and was a doctor because their dad wanted them to be a doctor. I think almost everyone on the call today is probably feeling a little bit like that. What do they do to try and chase that dream that they had when they were 15, and now they feel maybe it's been a bit too late, but also happy but poor, rich but bored. Some very profound things for people to sort of feed off of there. Some really deep things. So we'll be coming back to you to try and get some questions after we hear from the rest of the panel, and then you'll join them on that. If you have any more questions for Ivy, please do put them in the group. But there's so much to learn from about building and buying and borrowing for human talent and human capital in Africa. Character and competence building, trust, that was a big one for me. And then of course the thing about personality, your vocational interests, skills, and values. And what I was hearing from that, Ivy, is, do you actually really know who you are? Do you know what you're good at? Do you understand what your personality is? And so some of the big questions that I think we'll come back to put to you, and we'll come to them. For now, though, let me quickly go over to a bit of a panel discussion to give some thoughts on this. And each of our panelists is going to be given about 10 minutes to share their thoughts. And then we'll come back and try and put all the questions together to them as a panel, because I think we're learning from each and every one of them, and it's going to be very powerful. Now, our next panelist is someone who I look up to greatly. Ivy was talking about who are we learning from. I think really pretty much our entire panel are people that I'm learning from. But this particular individual has had a career that has spanned more than 3 decades in the legal, in the human resource, as well as corporate governance space. And he's got experience in various roles, not only at Shell International across Africa, Europe, and Latin America. He's also developed a multidisciplinary expertise. Currently, he's a lawyer by profession, working as a governance and strategic policy formulation consultant. And his professional journey also includes serving as the Deputy Inspector General of the government of Uganda for more than 8 years up until 2021, prior to which he also held significant positions within Shell, such as an HR advisor and a team leader. But he's very well qualified too, and has a Bachelor of Law, Masters of Law from Makerere University, as well as a postgraduate diploma in legal practice. And his academic qualifications are further complemented by some 2 honorary doctorates from esteemed institutions in the UK and the US. Outside of his career, he's happily married to one wife who is also a bit of a celebrity, and he lent her his name, and she made it very famous as well. and together they have raised 2 adult children, a son and a daughter. Please welcome to Inspire Synergy 2023, George Bamugemereire. Uncle George, very good evening to you. Good to see you. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Just trying to make some adjustments. Yes, nice to see you, Ben.
Nice to see you too.
I'd like to thank you very much for this invitation. I'd like to thank Inspire for this vision and for the consistency and the planning and the way you've made this Inspire movement. Actually, you've turned it into a movement, a very strong and big movement and a transformational vehicle for Africa. So I'd like to thank you very much for inviting me here to participate in the panel. I'd like to also thank Ivy Mawuko, who has really given a PhD course in human resources in 1 hour. Actually, Ivy, you've really knocked us off balance because I'm even wondering whether I should say anything. But now that I've been given the 10 minutes, maybe I'll pick 1 or 2 issues to build on. First, I'd like to say that my view about human capital in that is required in the marketplace to build Africa, I would start by saying that we are not the first people to seek human capital. Human capital has been a phenomenon of change, a force for good and transformation in the world for centuries. Let's say from the creation of man. But as we stand, we probably need to paint a picture of the economy of the world. I was just looking up some statistics. Africa has 1.39 billion people with a GDP of 3.14 trillion as of 2023. The whole of Europe had a population of 748 million and a GDP which is 7 times as much, which is 24.22 trillion. Asia, with a population of 4.7 billion, has a GDP of 41.36 trillion US dollars. And then the United States, with a population of 331.9 million, has a GDP of 23.32 trillion US dollars. Just wanted to put those numbers out. And you can see that despite Africa having a population of 1.39 billion, our GDP is just 3.14 trillion. So the question is, why is Africa where it is? And many of you would have many explanations. There was colonialism, there was this, there was that, our resources were taken and so on. But I think we need to take a critical look because, I mean, a lot of these things are in the past and we should be looking forward. And turning to the themes and the scriptures that have been shared by Inspire, Isaiah 43 verse 19, behold, I'll do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth, shall you know it? I even make a way in the wilderness. Isaiah 60, arise, shine, for thy light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. And then Nehemiah 2:17, then I say to them, you see trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burnt with fire. Come, let us rebuild. I just want to put a question. Of these 3 theme verses, which call applies to Africa most? And I would like people to pop their responses in the chat room. Is it the behold, I do a new thing? Is it arise and shine in Isaiah? Or is it Nehemiah? And I said, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins. I just wanted to put that out there to see where Africa is based on the figures and everything that we know. Now, economists generally agree that economic development and growth are influenced by 4 factors. One, and the number 1 factor, is human resources. The number 2 is physical capital. The 3rd is natural resources, and 4th is technology. Now, if we look at the big economies and we ask, particularly regarding the human resources, what have they done to get where they are? Because all the inventions, all the innovations, all the big buildings, everything we see, the wealth and so on, has actually been driven primarily by man. A human being has come up with a concept of how to start a mobile phone. A human being came up with the invention of the aeroplane. A human being came up with the invention of the ship, and so on. And so all these big, the radio, the television, internet, Zoom, all this that we are benefiting from, they were initially driven by human capital. So it's important that we focus on the human being. Now, what did these people do? What did the Western world, which is far ahead of us, do to get their human beings to be innovative, to be creative, in a way that has transformed their continents? I think the first thing that we see is that they have really focused on developing the human being. They studied their communities, identified their needs, and then figured out, what does a successful human being look like? What is a useful human resource look like? That's a profile that they constructed. And it's important that we too examine that question. What does the African innovative, creative, transformative Africa look like? To me, I see that as our challenge, the challenge of our century. Can we draw that profile? The profile of the African who can drive transformation, can drive development, and can drive change in Africa. Now, I was touched. I think I was an HR manager. Sorry about that. A number of years ago, and one time, my managing director came to me and said, I was HR manager in Uganda. He said, George, I'd like to ask you that for all future recruitments, I would like you to recruit people who have had exposure to the Western world. Either through study, I would like to hire people who have at least one degree, whether graduate or postgraduate degree qualification from either Europe or America. And that thing really actually frightened me, because it dawned on me that I actually didn't qualify to work with this man. Because me, as you've heard from Ben, I studied at Makerere. And here I was being told, you are working in a multinational organization and would like to transform the culture of this organization. And one of the tools we'd like to use is for you to hire only people who have at least one postgraduate or graduate qualification from outside Europe, because I find the company too Ugandanized. Now that really touched me. So it dawned on me that the owners of this multinational company had a very clear idea of what a person who works with them should look like. And should be a person who is capable of thinking like them, or if you can't think like them, at least understand the way they think and the way they work. Now, for them, they do not create jobs for the sake of a job. A job is created to solve a problem. So if you are to be a useful resource and fill a position, then you must be a type of person who is selling a skill in order to solve a problem that brings profit to the organization. Question is, what are we going to do in Africa? Do we know what we actually need? Do we have that picture of the person that can help Africa rise from where we are, as we say, arise in this Inspire conference, Africa, rise and build. Looking back, we really don't have to reinvent the wheel. I like referring to the story of Daniel, because what our friends are saying is not new. This concept was actually started long ago in the time of Nebuchadnezzar. If you look at this story, it's many people are referring to it these days, the story of Nebuchadnezzar. And verse 2, Daniel 2:1-2 says, and Daniel delivered Joachim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles in the temple. These he carried off to the temple of his God and put them in the treasure. Then verse 3, he says, then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and nobility. So this is the profile. He was trying to build the kind of Israelites that he wanted to work with him. So they must be royal family and nobility. Verse 4, young men without any physical defect. They must be handsome or good looking, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well informed, quick to understand, qualified to serve in the king's palace. And he was to teach them the language and literature of Babylonia, and the king to send them food. I mean, that's the story. But King Nebuchadnezzar did exactly the same. He drew up a profile of the kind of people that would be useful to his kingdom. He wasn't looking for his kinsmen. Actually, these were slaves that had been conquered. But he says, among them, there are people who are already trained. Why did he look for nobility? He looked for people who are from the royal family and the nobility, because in general, the people in the nobility and the royal palaces are actually trained, and they are not trained in adult life. They're actually trained from the day they are born. If you are to be the king of England, from the moment you are born, there is a hierarchy who will come first and who will come next. And then as soon as the child gets children, then they start rearranging the order and so on. So they start grounding you into becoming into a nobility as you should be, because you are going to face certain tasks and there are certain things that are expected of you by that community. So my challenge to us in Africa, where can we get those nobility? Where is that profile? And for me, my argument is we have to break down our current education system. We have to review our parental skills and be able to create this nobility. This profile, by the way, it works across the board. This profile that Nebuchadnezzar was looking for is something that applies across the board. We in Africa also need to be drawing what a good worker looks like. And here is a template. But in the African context, who are these people? These have to be constructed by every family on earth. Every family in Africa has a duty to construct this person. Because, and when we do, in verse 17, it says, to these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding, because God then comes in. You know, having got all these natural attributes, so things that you've got by accident of birth and so on. Verse 17 says, God comes and intervenes and gives knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. So this comes together. There is a training, there are the natural attributes, there are the natural gifts that God has put in everybody, but then God comes in and says, in addition to that, then he gives a knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all skills. The market right now, Africa, even in Africa, is that it's demanding a person who understands the African needs. What are the African needs? And then how can we construct that person who has the attributes that the African market demands? Because right now, most of us are having to fit into the profile of the Western world, because that's where we've been reading the GDP. The GDP dictates that we all gravitate towards a place where people can actually pay us decently, which is a very unfair situation. And I think our sister Ivy has already referred to that brain drain. Why does brain drain happen? It's because we have not been able to create an economy that can reward talent, and in other words, we can't even be able to be creative and transformative as we should be. So for me, my appeal on this, in the few minutes you've given me, is that we must examine what we can do to help our children, because I'm now looking at children, because I think our generation has not done well at all. I don't think our generation has served Africa well. We've not been able to transform Africa to a place where people can also be attracted to come and work for us. So we all go the other side, and that's why a man can come to Uganda and say, please, I only want you to recruit people who have been there, where I come from, who know how I think, who know what I should be doing. So to me, that is a challenge. We need to construct that person, and this happens by us investing in what makes good human capital. It is high quality education, jobs, skills that help develop human capital. There are some characteristics of success in the life of the children. One, we need to be giving active learning techniques. We need to be creating a learning environment. We need to be developing clear communication. We need to be developing good relations between the teachers and the students. And above all, developing people with critical thinking and problem solving, because that is what, that's the kind of resource, human capital, that we are looking for. If you go across the whole of Africa, what will you find? You'll find many adult human beings sitting on verandas from morning to sunset. Sometimes they are playing a game. Sometimes they're discussing local politics. Yet when you go to some cities, you don't see a human being, because everybody has been trained to do something. Everybody is doing something from morning to sunset. Then they go home, and because they are tired, but what are we going to do to transform our own communities so that people can be got off the streets and they got from where they spend all the time and they become useful? I'll now finish. So when we talk about human capital, what do we mean? Human capital that takes you forward, one, requires communication skills. A lot of the people are being given opportunity, but they can't communicate. And that's the problem. We need good education, but education that is tailored to problem solving and critical analysis of the African problem, how to solve it. We need to be developing people with technical skills, because again, we have a lot of thinkers. They theorize about this, they theorize about that, but get a simple problem. In our house here, where I am now, sometimes there are times we've had no water, or maybe water is just trickling. And then, my wife looks at me, maybe we live with it for weeks until one time when we get time and we look for a plumber, somebody who studied how to adjust, and the man comes in 3 minutes, he somehow fixes that, and then water begins to flow. It always humiliates, I feel humiliated. But people are learning human technical skills, and then creativity. People have been creative. This person who came up with a mobile phone that you can now reach anybody and everywhere in the world. These are people who are creative and thinking, and we need that for Africa. We need to build people with experience and problem-solving skills, people with mental health, a subject which has already been dealt with by, I think, Dr. Ruth Senyonyi, and personal resilience. Then I will not go beyond that because I would like to leave time for the rest. But I think that to me is my contribution. How are we going to construct? How are we going to rebuild the African mind that can actually confront the African challenges for our century? Thank you.
No, thank you, Uncle George. Incredible supplement that you've given to what Ivy has shared earlier. It's amazing. Ivy tagged that at our hearts very strongly. You've tickled our brains as well and provoked our minds. And it's incredible to hear what both of you have done and how it aligns. Some very interesting comments also coming through. Paul here is saying, thank you for being very honest about the fact that the older generation hasn't maybe done as well as they should have. And he thinks that should be a starting point of discussion about celebrating success, but also looking at what we need to do to change the narrative. I want to encourage us, if you have any questions for Uncle George and for Ivy and for our two panelists who are coming up in a little bit, we have a Q&A section on the chat, and I would encourage you to go and type your question there even now as we take a very quick break. And of course, for Ivy and for Uncle George, they'll be able to come into that chat room and respond to many of those questions, even in the chat. We'll also try and pick some of them and do a bit of a discussion around them when we get to a Q&A section, but some very powerful things coming out from you. And thanks a lot for sharing some great thoughts, some insights for us to be able to take a look at. So let's take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll get to meet our two final panelists for the night, who will each also have 10 minutes to share some of their thoughts and insights, and then we'll open it up for you to ask some questions and get some discussion going with our speakers and panel for tonight. We'll be back in just a moment after you watch this.
The world is sinking, but Africa is rising. It's time for Africa to turn the tide of political conflict, economic uncertainty, and moral decadence. The time is now for Africa to arise and rebuild. Inspire E-Conference 2023 will give you the tools and strategies to be part of Africa's rebuild. Join us online this August from Monday the 7th to Saturday the 12th from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. East African time as we gather the brightest minds across the continent to discuss the rebuilding of Africa. Book your slot today and be part of the movement that will change Africa forever. Africa, arise and build. The world is sinking, but Africa is rising. It's time for Africa to turn the tide of political conflict, economic uncertainty, and moral decadence. The time is now for Africa to arise and rebuild. Inspire E-Conference 2023 will give you the tools and strategies to be part of Africa's rebuild. Join us online this August from Monday the 7th to Saturday the 12th from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. East African time as we gather the brightest minds across the continent to discuss the rebuilding of Africa. Book your slot today and be part of the movement that will change Africa forever. Africa, arise and build.
And we're back. In case you've just joined us, day 4 of Inspire Synergy Summit 2023. My name is Ben Winner. We've had some wonderful, wonderful presentations so far from Ivy and Mawuko, as well as George Bamugemereire. And of course, just to remind you that this recording will be available if you're following us on YouTube. Of course, now you can catch that live, but also a recording later on, and the link will be made available so you can be able to share this with other people so they can be provoked as well. A reminder to share your questions in the Q&A section, and then we'll come back to those and get our panelists to respond to them. And some very interesting and thought-provoking questions coming from you as well, including this one from you, Dr. Kamunyu. You're saying that we track our best children and deliberately invest in them to liberate others, to create technologies and invent. For example, you're saying how much raw coffee do you need to sell in order to be able to buy a technology for adding value to that coffee here at home? Some very interesting questions coming in from you, so please do keep them coming in our Q&A section, and we'll put those to our panelists, who will also be able to actually come and respond to some of them even now as we get on to our next discussant, who is a friend of mine. He is a highly experienced professional with a diverse background, not just in the human resource management, but also in organizational development, administration, logistics management, strategic management, and governance as well. And over the past 2 decades, he has honed his expertise in various sectors, including banking, logistics, as well as the public sector. He's played some key roles in organizational assessment, in system design, and capacity development to enhance performance for organizations. He's got a master's in organizational psychology, as well as an associate diploma in people management and a postgraduate diploma in human resource management and another diploma in project planning. Right now, he works as a consultant with Mind Global Consult, and he serves as an associate consultant with the Uganda Management Institute as well, one of the premier learning institutions here in Kampala, Uganda. And in his personal life, he's married and finds joy in his marriage, importantly, to Elizabeth, and they've got the wonderful privilege and joy of raising 3 beautiful children together. Please welcome to Inspire Synergy 2023, George Okello Opio. George, a very good evening to you. Good to see you, looking sharp. It's very interesting to find people who still look as smart as you do this late in the night. So I guess that says a lot about you from what Ivy was saying about character and competence combined, yeah?
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for having me this evening. I'm glad to be tagged alongside you for these next few minutes. It is quite interesting. I've been sitting here and listening to Ivy and George, and even throughout the discussions, and it is quite interesting to know what is happening. My interest this evening, Ivy has almost rendered us unemployed this evening, but we want to add a pace to probably what she has given us this evening. When I was approached to join this panel, I looked at the concept of building. And as we look at the issues of human capital in Africa, I think the builders concept comes to the fore. As a builder, one of the issues that I see for Africa is that we are doing a lot of things. So many things in the area of human capital, but there's no proper structure to it. Just like a builder, a building has components, the foundation, and so on and so forth. And each of those components require different approaches, different skills, different materials to be deployed. Similarly, a building has a number of elements that has to be looked at. The electrical, the engineering, the structures, the plumbing issues. All these issues require people with different skills, different competencies to do them. And certainly they follow principles. And that speaks that every of these areas, they are mandates that are given to people. And for me, as we wind up this discussion today, I think the issues of human capital in Africa is about design. How do we design the human capital structure that is fit for purpose? And for me, this also speaks to our own environment. What is our current environment? It's very important because just like a builder, if you started building and you discover that the area you are building is waterlogged, I think the approach changes. And certainly, God blesses us with the ability to work so that we honor Him. And that requires us to look at to create value. Labor must create value, must bring qualities that influence productivity. Now, for Africa to influence the world, we must be productive. And if you are to be productive, we require to have these abilities. We have to have creativity. We have to have a good sense of judgment in everything that we do. As we look at this discussion this evening, it is also important for us to paint a picture. What is the challenge in Africa right now? Related to human capital. When you go to the area of health, nutrition, and population, 32% of children under 5 are stunted. There are 200 maternal deaths annually, more than 700 deaths annually due to TB and HIV/AIDS, and totally fertility rate of 4.8%. The interesting thing is the least privilege of the society contributes to the biggest population in Africa. Still, in Africa, 2.9 million children die under 5 every year. Low coverage and quality of key interventions are also very visible in the different parts of Africa. Not to forget also Africa, over 50 million children are out of school. And as we speak about this, I want you to think about the neighbor in the next slum where you live, the next slum near where you live, the people who grab your phones in the street, and so many of these are the challenges that we have in Africa. Low completion rates and learning outcomes every year. This is something that we see everywhere where we live, every village where we come from, these things are visible. Still, in Africa, nearly 420 million youth aged 15 to 35 are unemployed. Only 20% of the lowest quintile in low-income countries are covered by social protection. Now, this is the picture that you can paint for Africa. I'm not saying this to scare you, but just to trigger your mind, to know that even as we're talking about human capital development, that is the picture Africa has. It is also interesting also to look at the global trends. Amidst all those challenges, we are living in a boundless world. That means that everything, with all those issues in Africa, we are open to the rest of the world. Now, this has both an opportunity for Africa, but also poses a challenge, especially when we look at the low quality of human capital that we have. And certainly what this calls also from us, that Africa, we are no longer looking at a specific place of work. We're not looking at a job as work. And so the shift in thinking is also important as you are addressing the human resource development, whether at personal level, at community. I think this is very important to look at. What mattered most previously was managing cost and productivity. Now, if you're a human resource person in an organization, it is now beyond this. Certainly, organizations have also gained permission to experiment, pilot, innovate, to define new fundamentals. Now, what is the key for us also to note in this age is that many organizations making a mistake is a crime. And so there must be a shift in thinking that if people are making mistakes, experimenting and innovating, and they make mistakes, there should be room for mistakes. Certainly, the rules also must change. We must shift. We must have our doors open and have more meaningful collaboration and co-creation in organizations. So that is the picture of the world. We are looking at competition. Everywhere you turn, there's competition, and competition is not only locally. Competition comes from, if you look at coffee, assuming you're a coffee producer in Uganda, you are not only competing with the Ugandan coffee producer, you're competing from everywhere in the world. And we are not also spared by the so many disruptions. There are discontinuity of things, there are disruptions, there's recreation of organizations. There are so many global happenings like COVID-19 that we had recently, establishment of new markets. If you were a civil servant so many years ago, you would be talking about job security. You'll be thinking about staying in the job until you retire. Now you may not know. There are very many good examples in Uganda, organizations that people have lost jobs. Talk about UNRWA, talk about URA. A lot of people lost jobs. Now we are talking about Bank of Uganda. Having talked about that, Georgia has taken a lot of time to paint a picture for the future. And I want to suggest that whatever we are doing, we must have a multidimensional approach to dealing with human capital challenges in Africa. And it is, I believe also that each one of us, whether you are at family level, as an individual, all of us have a role to play. George has taken a lot of time to talk about family. And every time I sit in interviews and interview people, a lot of things that you see, where is this person coming from? Because everybody who is employed is coming from a family. And a lot of effort must be devoted to make sure that families thrive. I will not take a lot of time on this because George has given a very big direction on this. One of the things also that probably I will add, which is very important, is providing a secure environment in the family. Now, if you get people coming to be interviewed, you see people who are timid, you see those who are not confident, you look at their character and you wonder. I believe that a lot happens in the family, and this influences what we take to the market. Going back to ourselves, maybe you may be somewhere there, you are working, and you are thinking that your employer is responsible for your progress. I think that dimension of thinking, there must be a shift in our thinking. An employer is no longer responsible for your thinking. There's a concept called the new psychological contract. In the new psychological contract, each one of us is responsible for our destiny. And that means you must know yourself. Where are you deficient? Where do you lack skills? Evie has pointed out very clearly that there are two areas that we need to look at. The issue of character and competence. This has to be developed at our own level. Right now, employers are not looking for people with specific skills. They are looking for multi-skilled people. They are looking for people who can create. They're looking for people with the energy. They're looking for people with the high emotional intelligence. People must be thinking like researchers. What more can we do to improve what we have? For me, I think if we focused in developing ourselves, developing people at our family levels, it will be very important for us to take steps like this and make sure that we develop our character, develop our skills, and so for our children and the people that we take care of. Certainly, the employer is not spared. The employer has a role to play. A lot of times that we find challenges of employment, there are issues of influencing learning outcomes. Just imagine that all the employers, private employers in Uganda, determine the competence level required and tell the universities, the training institution that this is what we want in the world of work. I believe there will be a dimension that will change the landscape of employment. This happens already, is happening already in the vocational training. Employers have taken a lead. And as we talk about skilling people, employers are defining vocational skills required in the industry. And I believe this can be borrowed by the rest of the employer. Let's talk about the HR Association, the employer organizations, and many other groupings that are concerned with employment. I also believe that it is important that appropriate culture is developed in institutions. We have seen in institutions where every day in the press you see people attacking each other in the press. There's infights within organizations. This clearly indicates an absence of an appropriate culture. We need to unlock the workforce ecosystem to make sure that we are not only looking at one employment in one form. We need to look at employment from different forms. There are people who can come and give you 1 hour and cause productivity in your organization. It's no longer necessary to think about 8 to 5. It's no longer necessary to think about someone coming every day. It's no longer necessary to only think about working from office. we need to look for look for potential and unlock them. Some time back, as I was recruiting, a young lady walked into my office with a CV. We're recruiting relationship officers. And when this young lady, she was working in an SMS company, she told me, I want a job. When I gave the business people to look at her CV, many of them laughed. And because of my interaction of this lady, I insisted that let's give her a chance and you listen to her. We interviewed this lady, and I can tell you this lady is a senior manager in Standard Chartered Bank. We gave her a chance and we unlocked her potential. We also need to make sure that we co-create relationships at work so that employees can thrive, can build one another. And as we leave the employer, I think it is also important for us to look at training institutions. Because as we talk about someone who is not skilled, someone who is not good, they're coming from institutions. These institutions shun people every day. If you look at the number of graduates that are produced in Uganda, and you look at the level of unemployment, and you look at also the number of foreigners who are employed in some of the positions, it tells you probably that the skill sets that we give people are not right. So there must be some thought about the curriculum. Is the curriculum relevant? Are we providing wholesome training? Have we benchmarked best practices? Have we created environment for learning that allow people to create, to innovate? Are we giving people opportunity to improve their learning outcomes? So when we do this as an institution, and I believe the training institutions with the influence from the employers can do a very good job. And certainly professional bodies will also have a role to play here. What standards do we have for profession? For example, accountants, human resource professionals, economists, statisticians. What standards of profession that have we developed? How do we monitor quality in our respective professions? As I was thinking about this human resource, human capital, I was looking at faith-based institutions. Have you known that of the 79 schools, primary schools in Kampala, 50 of these schools are owned by faith-based institutions? 50. That's a very high percentage. What are these faith-based institutions, including our churches? What are they doing to influence content, curriculum development? How are they reinforcing the right values? How do they take bold actions to address issues of the day? And of course, not to mention, we need to pray. But as we look at we play all these roles, it is very important that we look at synergy and collaboration. No single person, no single institution, no single organization can work alone. We must synergize, we must collaborate. We also must influence culture change in employment, in schools, in society, at our homes, and certainly there are already existing opportunities. How can we leverage on them? I believe that for we are God's work, and we are created in Christ to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. None of us can claim that we can't add a pace. Either you're a parent, either you are an individual working, you can contribute skill, you can learn. These days, it is not difficult to learn. You can even go online and learn something. And I believe learning, like it has been pointed out, learning is a continuous process. I learn every day. Even as we discuss, as we listen to each other, there are a lot of learning that we are picking from these discussions. And so the responsibility is in our hands. One important thing that you will note that whereas we have those 3 or 4 factors of production, the only one that cannot be separated from the physical and financial assets is human capital. The skills you have, the knowledge you have, the health you have, the values you have cannot be separated from you. So that means it is the only thing that we need to touch. The moment we develop human capital in Africa, all the other factors of production will be turned on. And this requires a massive coordinated effort to strengthen quality. We need to do this with the efficiency. We need to have investment in this area. One of the things that we probably have to adopt is to unlearn the behaviors. If you're a parent, long are the days when if you need to be beaten to learn. Probably we need to unlearn. We need to unlearn certain things. We need to probably make sure that we move away from the practices that hold us back. We need to unlearn. We need to relearn new things. It's no longer necessary to read. Now, one of the biggest tragedy that we have is this concept that people have of accumulation of paper qualification. Every day you go to every institution, people are busy. Someone that has finished this course is going to the other one. But it is no longer necessary just to accumulate qualification, but to accumulate skills. I believe that, Ben, that if we do accumulate skills at our level, we impart skills at our families, we collaborate as institutions to do the things that need to be done together, the landscape of human capital development in Africa will change. Thank you so much, Ben. Over to you.
Thank you very much, George. Again, wonderful, wonderful thoughts. I think for me, today has gone perfectly well so far. You've got lots of emotional things being said. You've got lots of technical things being said. You've got quite a number of academic things being said. You bring all that together and you have some wonderful suggestions and solutions what we can do as a continent. You've had a lot said today so far about what we can do to develop our human capital as a continent. But here's some statistics for you. I don't know if you are aware. I know Uncle George mentioned that there's almost 1.4 billion people on this planet. But are you aware that the majority of those are still very, very young? Actually, our median age as a continent is still under 19 years old. And what that means basically is that there's a lot of promise for the future for our young people. And the discussion is, what can we do to make sure that we help them become the solution providers for our continent if we are going to arise and rebuild Africa? Before we get here from some of your questions and have them answered, let's hear from one more panelist today. He's a friend of mine. He's one of the funniest people and one of the most fun people to hang out with, despite his gray hair. And he is a seasoned leadership and management consultant with a diverse career spanning senior management positions and program development for organizations. He's got expertise in organizational strengthening. He's worked with senior and middle management, program development officers. He has an extremely amazing ability to facilitate organizational development assignments and events as well. And owing to his extensive knowledge of organizational operations and critical analytical skills, he's been able to serve in many places, including at the moment, several local and international boards, further showcasing his commitment to organizational growth. Besides his consultancy work, our next panelist passionately pursues 3 core passions: personal development, strategic planning, as well as instructional materials writing. And his engaging and energetic style as an inspirational speaker, as you're about to find out, has earned him some recognition. His philosophy as a speaker is to leave behind practical tools and models so that his audiences can feel empowered to continue their development journey independently. He's also a devoted family man and is married to a beautiful woman called Helen. And they've decided they're only going to have girls, so they have 3 daughters. And he also holds a bachelor's degree in sociology, a master's in demography, and is currently pursuing studies in transformational leadership, as well as a master's in demography. So now, welcome with me to Inspire Synergy 2023, David Kabiswa. David, always good to be with you. welcome to Inspire 2023.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you for the warm introduction. Thank you as well for the invitation. And without taking much time, I don't know if you noticed, but in the chat, I changed my name. Many people do not know that my middle name is George. So when I realized that the majority of the people there was George, I said, why not? That might be one of the ways of catalyzing the human capital redevelopment in Africa. So thank you. An interesting evening. I've been listening a lot, and I feel that some good stuff has been said. So I was also thinking through which of my slides I would jump. I want to take an approach, and I've been reading a little bit in the chat as well. And basically, there is pain, all right? And the pain very many times looks at what is the situation, what is the context, what. And I sense that we do seem to know what to do, but sometimes maybe are unable to do it. I looked at an article today, and these are some of the things that struck me. This was an article, it was fostering learning between Europe and Africa. And these are some of the things that they observed. The article is called Lack of Skilled Human Capital in Resource-Rich Africa, the Real Paradox. They call it a paradox because over these days, we've all heard, we don't doubt that Africa has this potential. We don't doubt. Even the last speaker, George, has just said, in fact, as you, Ben, who said, you know, the average age, the mean age shows potential, all right? But then we also probably realize that that same age group is lacking some of the things to maybe to put them as a position of being able to run the minerals, the oil of this nation, the other, you know, potential that we have the environment, okay? But in this article, they also realized that some of these things at the time, one of the challenges we're having is that there's no specialized training. It's interesting. When tallow came into this country, they needed Tallow Oil, the company, to start drilling. They needed welders. And despite the number of welders we have in this country, they found none that could do welding in an oil environment. Why? A lot of our welders, and some of you have seen, when you look at something that's been welded, there's always a little bit of the age which shows you, yeah, this has been welded. But you see, if you're in an oil industry, you can imagine a metal moving over that thing. That might be a spark. So that could cause a fire. So our welders did not qualify, all right? So they had to take about 200 welders to take them another country, you know, so that they could qualify to weld in the petroleum industry, all right? But some of our challenges exist in, you know, those two bold bullets there. Low incentives for skills development and high elite interests. Some of the things we know, but there are blockages there. And some of the blockages might just be the clash of interests with national political elites. Some people want to benefit, all right? When they talk about the case of Central African Republic, when Bokassa was there, he took all the highly qualified people and then replaced them with people from his tribe, such that, you know, it kept the industry at a level where only they could benefit. In Congo Brazzaville, we've had certain similar situations in the aspect of oil. In Gabon, we've had that kind of stuff. All right. There are also challenges of self-preservation, and the list goes on. All right, that's part of the pain. All right, and we can't, you know, get there too much. It's already been said. It is imperative to invest in human capital. It is imperative. It is imperative. We say it, we say it, we say it. Many years ago, when the president, I remember him having a discussion and wondering why the people at the university could not change the curriculum. We're spending more courses in humanities. We're taking people into humanities and not focused on where the country is going. Many years ago, in the days when we were younger and my people like our parents were in government, we were told that the East African Development Community used to do what they called labor forecasting. They would know how many people are needed in architecture in the region. Then the intakes of those universities would be limited to that number. How many human resources do we need? There was some kind of centralized planning. In the chat, I noticed that also somebody asked that, okay? When we're talking Africa, somebody asked, is there going to be a centralized, who's going to do the centralized planning? and we probably know that the reasons, okay? But we do know that at levels of African Union, these sorts of discussions happen. Will they get down to be implemented at the country level? Probably, all right? So my solution now, one of the things that I want to tease our minds on is that we have a relook at leadership. And part of the relook of leadership is basically going to mean, like one person put it, Robin Sharma put it, leadership without a title. I am talking now to the people on this call, and it is you that I'm calling the leaders. The 215 people on this call, it is you that I'm calling the leaders. And what can we do? I'm going to use this by giving some tools. And I'm hoping that when you get this presentation, or you can, if you've got a phone, you can take some screenshots as we move along. It is this. This model, this framework comes from a book called Good to Great. And the line which is horizontal and then goes up basically says that many companies, many countries, maybe it can even be applied to countries who are in the ordinary zone, Then there's some red box there in the middle. Something happened in that red box, and then the trajectory started changing. Things started going up. This model gives us hope that things can happen. What did they find out? In that model, they found out those three black things: disciplined people, disciplined thinking, disciplined action. Should it necessarily be linear? Maybe, maybe not. Part of the session we've had earlier on, we talked about the brutal facts. What's happening? The population, the lack of thing, the crime, the laziness. Those are brutal facts. All right? But my proposal and proposition, and I'll touch three elements, is that the kind of leadership that we have, I'll take that about leadership. I'll talk about focus, which is in the area of disciplined thinking, and then momentum. Now that cycle shows that under the disciplined people, the quality of leader is crucial. And then the people, who, which person, which position. We've heard about a round, a round pin in a square hole. How do you make sure it's a square pin in a square hole? Okay. Now remember, this is a model, it's a framework. It can be used by you in your workplace, it can be used by you in your home, it can be used and can also be taken at the government level. So the aim here is that we see how to operationalize this model and not think it's just for those that's out there and that the solutions will come from out there. That round circle there is very, very crucial. It's called the flywheel. And that's the thing about momentum. It basically means we've got to do it, keep doing it. And as we keep doing it, things will get better. Leadership. The first thing we're going to look at is leadership. And I've got a few slides there. Some people have heard about the level 5 leader. Now, a level 5 leader, take it to mean a leader par excellence, a leader that is beyond the leaders that we have here. Okay. Now, in that book, they didn't quite use the term servant leadership, but they found out that the people that take organizations to the next level, people that take cities to the next level, people that take institutions to the next level are people that have demonstrated what we can call an X factor for those of you that follow music, all right? These are people that have level 5. And the level 5, in terms of bullet 3, it is people that have humility mixed with a strong professional will. I want to suggest to you that part of Africa's problem is the quality of leaders that we have, all right? And it can be debated. Now, servant leadership or the level 5 leadership basically means that your primary desire is that it comes from a servant heart. But then that servant heart drives you to do something about, I must get into a leadership position to make these things happen. Servant leaders desire results with such tenacity. They are professional, no doubt, but they make sure that the people they're working with want to work where they're working with. All right? Many of our leaders, they are bosses in character. They've got what we call a huge power distance. We will not go far in Africa with that kind of leadership. That's my proposal to you. If you're that kind of leader, let's rethink. Let's rethink. We leave such a huge power gap and people, so we're always recreating the wheel, Now, upping the stakes. To up the stakes, I'm proposing to you the servant leadership model. In the image there, you can see that yes, we come from a certain culture, we've got certain strategies, but there are some 7 pillars in this particular model that would take and transform an organization, transform a nation, transform whichever place they put you in, even in a church environment. Okay, they can transform to team, customers, and community. The key thing there, I'd want to just pick on pillar number 5 and 6, foresight. They have said foresight is one of the critical things that takes leaders to the next level. Foresight is one of the critical things. You and I on this call, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do we relate in terms of foresight? Are we people with foresight? Are we people that are just looking and being told, what to do? All right. Another critical thing is systems thinking. Systems thinkers don't highlight problems. They're more positive and looking at what solutions can happen. So I'm proposing to us, we must up the stakes from an individual level to develop a servant leadership mentality. In upping those stakes, I'm proposing the following: a minimum requirement. If you've not read any of these books, you must. I was even glad that one of them I put up. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Please, it has been said that tried anything from an African, put it in a book. We must move from there. Even the people that are talking, many of the people that out there are talking about high capacity and stuff like that, they're not readers. They're not readers. They go for training, they get something, and then they try to pass it down, then they run empty. We have to change. Now, for action points, under that section of leadership, that's my proposal. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, a must read. The Leadership Challenge, a must read. Good to great to see, those sorts, at least as entry level. Then you can go and do others. Leadership. The second tenet I want to propose as we think through a lot of these things, at individual level, even at country level, can be applied even at things like national development programs and stuff like that. I've called it focus. Focus. If Arise Africa, if we're to rise and shine, we must focus. All right? Now, in terms of focus and execution, we know that's something called a whirlwind. There are many things, many places in the air. Like some girls, when you're younger, you played with, many balls bouncing in the air. There are many. Even somebody asked in the chat there, what do we start with? Yeah, that's the question for everybody. I want to propose to you that there's methodology whereas the whirlwind still continues, all right? You can't stop it because the factor is even beyond your control. How do you get a semblance of focus, a semblance of stability, a semblance of what you can catch and take it to the next level? There's a goal there to take a man to the moon and bring him back safely by the end of the decade. That was a goal given by the President JFK to NASA. If it had been a longer presentation, I'd have shown you what objectives NASA had, goals it had 8. And when the president listened, he said, he focused it on that. They're talking about exploration of the outer spheres, being the pioneer in this, being ahead of whatever vehicles they're going to make, whatever scientific research, and it just boiled it down to that. Focus releases energy. My proposal to us here is to get some kind of focus. All right? Yes, we've said all these sorts of things. In your sphere of influence, get some kind of focus. The whirlwind continues. Focus. What do I want to do? X. By when? I want to move X to Y. By when? By Z. All right? It is very simplified here, but I'm saying, instead of us, because sometimes we can ask questions that paralyze us. You ask, who's going to do this? And by the question, by the time it leaves your mouth, you're fatalistic. We're saying the kind of human capital we're going to develop. Yes, it can be this, that they need school. And we know people here that are doing a lot of things in schools and stuff like that, which is good. They have focused schooling, education, schooling. They've done vocational. They're focused with the gifting and purpose and the way God made them. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. We are knit together. What God gave them, they are taking it to that level. What's my challenge? Upping our game. In your context, we are talking Africa, we're talking Arise Africa, but Arise Africa is going to be done by how we take care of the little things. There's an expression which says, take care of the cents and the shillings will take care of themselves. Of course, it's not shillings, it's dollars. Take care of the cents and the dollars will take care of themselves. I am proposing to you, take care of your corner and we shall start sorting Africa out. Don't get paralyzed by the bigger things. If you happen to be in those positions which can tackle those big things, tackle. All right? Again, they're upping your game in terms of focused execution. I challenge you, read the book 4 Disciplines of Execution. We must have a caliber of Christians as well that are called to and sought after to come and inform governments. All right? Third component, scale. Scale, scale, scale. And I've called it the flywheel. My proposal to us in the Inspire, all right? The flywheel that I showed in the beginning, it shows that you will do something. As you do it more, you get better at it and the efficiencies increase, but you must be consistent. When you look at the bottom, at the black things at the bottom there, the black boxes, they have one core word: discipline, 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 disciplined people, disciplined thinking, disciplined action. I think many times we lose it on the action. We sprint, get tired, we relax. We sprint, get tired. The people that take things to the next level persistently do this. In terms of countries, I can give you the example of Singapore. In one of the books that the former prime minister wrote, he wrote about how they used a bit of these things and the consistency of certain behavior that moved Singapore from a third world country to a first world. I will let you know that I am aware that people like in the neighboring countries around here, like Rwanda in particular, they are trying to follow after, they're modeling after Singapore. They have got people like Dambisa Moyo, some of those people, great thinkers on the continent, come speak to us so that we can go somewhere. Flywheel, momentum. To take Africa from where it is to where we want it to be would require consistent action where you and I have a role to play. These ones are just images about what the momentum looks like in the context of the organizations, the social sector. Attract believers, build strength, demonstrate results, build brand, and let the thing keep on going on like that. And your NGO will move from a lower level to a higher level. All right? For the business sector, this is theirs. You know, you take steps consistent with your hedgehog, consistent. When the KCCA person here, Jennifer Musisi, tried to do something, trying to clean city, trying people to love the city, she, amidst all those things that could have been the whirlwind, she chose a few areas of focus. Then she got the results, then the roads and things like that. And you saw the results were tapping, okay? But of course, we also know we have challenges when new people can come in and they stop the flywheel or they even reverse it. So what's the take for us? Upping your game. Move from a personal purpose. All right, I'm calling a hedgehog here. What has God called you to do? Are you doing it? Are you doing it well? Scale it up. It can move from a personal thing, it can move to scale, institutional. Your personal desire, you form an NGO, you form a CBO, it has moved to institutional. It gets even bigger, it gets organizational, it can get bigger. And in some of those things, I've given examples. Time doesn't allow, but I've given some examples. Down there, put about Rakai Coffee, a pastor who God called, and the pastor knew, I know one thing. What do you have in your hand? He knew how to do sponsorship. God said, okay, I want you to go back to Rakai, do coffee. He said, I don't know anything about coffee. God called him. As I speak in that particular situation, this person exports to Germany coffee, roasted coffee, not the core beans, all right? We heard about Mama Maria, that was Monday, all right? The school, all right? The vision, the catering thing, it grew, it became a hotel, it grew, it's become a series of other schools. And I'm told that they're also moving to Karamoja. What's your personal mission? How does it become institutional? Because that's how we scale. And we scale by things like systems. Some of you know about the Grameen model. The individual has changed Bangladesh. The individual, I repeat it. He started off by saying, how do I teach these men how to grow rice scientifically? And they did. They cheated him of his money, but he taught them how to do things scientifically. Then he went into banking and it scaled up. And the whole element of microfinance banking came from there. Brethren, what has God put on your heart that you can scale up? That's your sphere of control. That's what you can manage. How are we going to build human capacity? Some of you are people that can do businesses. You can employ. Yes, on Tuesday, yes, we had somebody. You know, the houses that they're building, I think it was in Kenya, the Nairobi area. What are you doing? All right. We've seen other, and I've just talked about a few models. There are many others. But when we talk about building the appropriate human capacity development, when you do things in your corner and do them well, and do them to scale, all right? The coffee I've talked about, now that individual pastor is linking up with other Christians, all right? In the same denomination, now others are starting to go there, they're galvanizing. Maybe it's something that also, you know, Pastor Laban is, you know, is doing, you know, how do you take it to scale? How do we take our things to scale? When we have models that people can follow, we shall lead the way. But very many times also from the Christian perspective, yes, we are playing catch up, not leading the way. My conclusion, the nature of human resource that Africa needs is going to be developed by a change in leadership. We could debate that every day. The quality of leaders we have just makes us go up and go down again, go up and go down again. We need those that genuinely want people to succeed, because one, the Christ model, he invested in the disciples. He could go after that. And the movement has gone on 2,000 years. But if you want power surrounding you, we will come back and go back and talk about that thing, with Africa taking slower strides. Will it be go forward? Yes, it might, but slower strides than it would take. My second takeaway for you. Current initiatives that we have need to scale. All right, let's provide models. There's Bishop Masika, who did something in the Kenyan, between the border of Uganda and Kenya, to such a point that a drought-ridden desert area has become one of the exporting areas in Kenya. When people saw that, they put them on security committees in Kenya, they put them on some international, you know, when we do things well and scale up, we will answer that question, because the economists know that the economic theory, but we've known it in books and it's not happening. Is God telling us, arise, shine, and build. My final one, and these are things that I've heard from some of the discussions this week. Company, that word has come up. Make a company. Can we as Inspire, you know, scale? What would it mean? Is it a think tank? Where is this momentum taking us? Those are my thoughts for you. But as we think big picture, let's come and take care of the cents, and the cents will take care of the shillings. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, David. Some wonderful thoughts there from you. I think my key takeaway from what you've shared is focus on your small corner. Don't worry about peace in Niger and what's happening there. You stay in your corner, do what you can, and eventually it will sort itself out. I'll tell you what, you've talked about this whole thing about scaling up Inspire to, I mean, whether it's a company or whatever. What I did hear from there, I think it was mentioned, was Inspire Movies. And I think it was mentioned by either Paul Wafula or Emma Osanga about why can't we be able to think about doing movies in this continent? If you look at what's happening in that industry, I happen to be in that space at the moment. There's a lot of potential for what we can do. But again, these are just thought-provoking discussions that are supposed to get us going. So let's get some questions going. We're running a little bit late, but we'll try and squeeze in as many as we can. If you have any questions, you put them on our Q&A, and we'll pick those up and make sure we can be able to put them to our panel. I'll start with you, Ivy. Of course, quite a number of questions that are coming through. One of the most important ones, you talked about being led or following people. And Emma here was asking on one of the platforms following us on the summit this week, is it advisable to follow just anybody, or should we be selective in following someone who is willing to teach us? So that's one of the key questions for you there. We just follow anybody? Because maybe they're Elon Musk and the richest man in the world, Are there things that in particular that I need to be looking out for in terms of what I should be following? One of the other questions that was given to you, Ivy, and I think you can pick up on this as well, is your thoughts on high labor export in Africa and the church's role in the same, as well as coaching and mentoring being used interchangeably. What's the difference between coaching and mentoring, and how do the two relate to what you mentioned about on-the-job learning? And then we also had some questions coming to you, George, Opio, Okello. I guess today is an evening of the three Georges and an Ivy. So for you, George, Opio, Okello, what particular skill set should African young people be focusing on immediately? That is, we're talking about the next 5 to 10 years, maybe. What do you think should be the one skill set people need to be thinking about? And then also someone, this is from Michael Okello, and is asking, and I guess I put this to you, Uncle George Bamugemereire, how do you suggest we address the leadership challenges, both in the church and in the politics of our country as well? That's a question that's coming up from quite a number of people. So maybe we can start by dealing with those, and then we'll pick up a few others. Ivy, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to George Okello Opio, and then we'll go up to Uncle George Bamugemereire as we get some more questions. If you have any, please do put them in the Q&A section of your Zoom. Of course, if you're on YouTube or any of their platforms, you can always ask a question and we'll pick that up and put it to our panel before we wrap up. So Ivy, if you can deal with those, and then we'll come to George, number one, that's Okello Opio, and then George, number two as well. And then I have some questions coming back to David in a moment too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ben. And what I would say such an aligned presentation we've just had. It's amazing that, that the Lord is really directing and amplifying the same things in different ways. I think the first one is who to follow. And then I think it's important to consider the different aspects of our life. In your career, I choose to follow people who are godly. I choose to read books of people that I want to learn from because they've actually walked this path before. So even sometimes you could be following people through their literature or books that they've written. You could also follow people, you could write them to say, I want to spend time with you. I remember a CEO was recently appointed in the ministry that I follow. And he said that before he was appointed, he had actually put up his hand by the then CEO that I want you to mentor me. And this man said, are you willing to come to my house every day, 4 a.m.? I go for a run, and that's when I can have time for us to chat. And that's how much, he said, I do that to test the litmus, to do the litmus test. How badly do you want me to teach you? So mentoring is not something casual. I'm not saying that people would say, come to their house at 4 a.m. I'm using this as an example to say that it will cost you, because sometimes the people that we want to follow are very busy. And the only time that they might get to be able to impact to you may not be a time that is conventional. It might be a little bit late, but I think that you should prayerfully think about godly people that will give you good counsel. It could be in an area of parenting, marriage, work, your career, join communities of practice, and spend time to be taught by people who are much more senior to experience. And then I think you asked about coaching and mentoring. And I did say that I think coaching is really a relationship between a coach and a coachee. And basically what the coach does a lot is asking very powerful questions to help you to come to a certain conclusion and awareness of what you could do. For us, mentoring is much more different. It's really passing on your experience to the other person. Sometimes you can do both in a relationship as well. Then I don't know whether there was a third one, but I think I covered the two questions that have come up to me so far.
Yeah, yes, you have done quite well. So let me just come to you, George Okello Opio, quickly in terms of any particular skills that you think African young people should be focusing on immediately. We know about the threat that's coming from AI. We've heard from Ivy and Judge Bamugemereire talking about some of the key skills that people need people to pick up in terms of critical thinking. Is there anything else that you think must be a focus for our young people on the continent?
Thank you so much, Ben. To put it straight, Ben, I think one of the areas where we are lacking is the soft side of skills. And I think that is the area where young people need to pay more attention to. And I think having an emotional intelligence is very, very, very important, because once you have emotional intelligence, it means you'll be able to understand yourself. You'll be able to understand other people. You'll be able to manage yourself, and you'll be able to develop relationship. And when you have that, that's basic. But the two also, one of the things also that I've noted with in the generation of now, we don't want things that task us. So I also would like to suggest that they need to develop their creative, critical thinking and problem solving. It's very important, because like if you notice in all the discussion that has happened through this week, there are so many problems to solve in Africa. And if you have critical thinking and you know how to solve problems, there lies opportunity. And probably the other bit also is how do you communicate? How do you collaborate? How do you analyze information? Now, if you want to know how information is mismanaged, just get a post and you say X is dead. And you will find so many post people if talking about it as if they have seen the person dead. So people don't analyze information. Information comes and people just jump into it. For me, I think that's a very big challenge that people have. So I think if we can learn, look at information, analyze, find out what you can do with the information, there's a lot that we can do. Of course, that not to forget creativity. We need to learn creative skills. There are so many issues around us. It requires us to be creative and create opportunities for ourselves. I believe those are the basic skills, but very important skills that we need to adapt. The young people need to learn now. Of course, we are operating in a digital space. It goes without saying that if you're a young person, and that's not a space that you operate, you need to do something. Because when we talk about learning, getting information, there's a lot of information in the digital space. So somehow the digital literacy becomes very important in this in the world today. Thank you so much, Ben. Over to you.
Thank you, George. Over to you, George. It's very difficult keeping track of the Georges, and now David Kabiswa has also decided he's a George, so I don't know. I'll start with you, Uncle George Bamugemereire. The issue of leadership. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I think both you and George Kabiswa can deal with this because you both play very heavily in the area of leadership. So maybe Uncle George, maybe Bamugemereire, can you touch on the leadership in the church, and then George Kabiswa can talk about leadership in terms of the politics and national leadership. How do we address that challenge? Because it seems to be coming up every time we talk about developing human capital for this continent.
Thank you very much, Ben, for that question. I think in addressing the question of leadership, I shall actually do I think this whole issue of leadership is actually cross-cutting. And I'll say some things, and George David will probably add on. The main concept of leadership lies in one word: influence. Influencing people to follow you. Influencing people to do what you do. Influencing people to do things the way you do them. Influencing people to think the way you think. Influencing people to go with you where you choose to take them. I think that's the real essence of leadership. Now, in law, I know in our first year law class, 30-something years ago, I remember a teacher teaching us something in Latin saying, "Nebedat quod non habet," meaning nobody can pass a better title than he himself has. You cannot give what you don't have. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because a lot of people clamor for leadership. Because obviously leadership has certain types of leadership come with privilege, come with benefits, come with the rewards, natural rewards that come. Sometimes they come with visibility and so on. But obviously, there are many people here online who have been trained in the concept of servant leadership. And that's one of the things that is lacking. We have too many people in leadership who shouldn't be. You see, in developed countries, and George David referred to countries like America, people invest in children. And if we just shift a little bit, say to organizations ensure that they are grooming the right people to lead them. I know when we're at Shell, one of the most remarkable things I found when working at Shell in London was that they had a database of the people they considered most talented all over the world. Shell was operating in 120 countries, but they had a profile. Even Uganda, I mean, I saw a record of some names, unfortunately, they had long retired. But they said in Uganda, we have 2 people who are capable of rising through the ranks to become the head of Shell in the world. And they had, these people were actually identified at age 22, you know, as they get out of university and they're applying for a first job, they take them through assessment, they identify their potential. And then when they get the real core group, they make sure you hold the job for 2 years and go to another one. And within a period of 20 years, you've actually mastered the whole organization because you've had different opportunities to lead and so on. So you're exposed to all sorts of departments and you're in a position to actually lead. So you've been trained, you've done job experience, you've been mentored, and in some situations, as you rise higher, then they assign you a coach, the coach to help you think through the day-to-day issues. Now, all those, that's a form of input and training that they are grooming you to rise to be able to be a leader one day. In fact, they used to say that if somebody threw a bomb on the head office of Shell in The Hague or London, you could easily mobilize some 200 people who could actually rise and run the organization. Now, that is the issue that we are not handling in African men organizations, because we have so many leaders who are leaders by accident. You know, somehow something happens and then you suddenly have this leader, and the leader, you know, when people become leaders, they get power, they get tools, and they can actually be in a place, in the wrong place, and affect so many people. So what am I saying? I go back to the theme where we've been, I think, many of us, that we as a country, you look at a country like Uganda, where we are, there is a home right now which is raising a president. We don't know which one. We don't know who the child is. We don't know what the parents are doing with that child, what the teachers are teaching that child, but there is a child. I mean, there must be a president who is born somewhere in this country or wherever he is. And it happens across. But does anybody know who it is? Do we know what the parents are doing to that child? Maybe they are hurting the child. And what will that child do when he rises to leadership? It will all impact leadership. So we're saying, let's make the right input in the children that we have. That's first and foremost. I think that's where the real battle starts. Are we pumping these children with the right values? Because the things that you put in them is what will affect the country, the organization, the church, or whatever structure this person will raise. I remember, and I'll give one last example as I finish. One time, we had a friend of ours, a classmate actually, who was married to a German lady, and they visited us in the UK. Took them to church, to our church. Then as we left the church, we were crossing, those small towns, they have what they call high streets, but the high streets are really not high at all. They're usually narrow streets, where the shops are. So we're crossing the shops, crossing the high street, and then the traffic light was still red. And we just looked left and right, didn't see any traffic. And I remember holding their son I think was about 5. I held the son and we crossed the road because there was no traffic. And I remember the mother of the child coming, he said, "George, you have killed me." I said, "What have I done?" He said, "You've destroyed everything I've done." I said, "What have you done?" She said, "I've been teaching this child that unless that little man turns green, you never cross the road. Now, George, you've destroyed all of it." I said, well, for us in Uganda, those are small things. But I just took a lesson from this lady, that for her, the German that she was, had learned that you must model, mold, create, shape your child into the right values. We are not doing that. So in a way, I think we are responsible for some of the problems we face. My appeal to everybody here who is a parent is let's intentionally be able to train children with the right values. Don't look at yourself. I mean, many of us have so many faults. Many have just happened to grow by luck, went to school, succeeded, and so on. But I think let's copy what other people are doing, training the children with the right values. Those things that we admire about others, why don't we impart them in our children? Those things that we fail to learn on our own, why don't we impart them in? Because we shall be doing a favor, not just to ourselves, not just to our families, but to organizations, to countries, to continents, and to indeed the whole world. Blessings. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, George. So George David, this issue of leadership, especially in our national space, and again, it probably comes back down to character. If you think about it, Ivy has talked about this. Is it something we can be able to fix in the current generation? Do we wait for everyone to die off and just focus on the next generation? How do we go about solving that problem?
I think I'll start off from where George Bamu has stopped. You know what? If we've made mistakes, doesn't mean we can't start again. All right? Once we get any new information and it works on us, in fact, that's what repentance is all about. Turn around and move. All right? He did say earlier that we've not done what our generation should do. Once we get to know better, he who much is given, much is expected. Once we get to know, we are responsible for that information and how we translate it. You asked me to talk about the political space. Many years ago, my church was involved in conducting leadership trainings in Nakurabi area. And I remember one LC man who came to me and said, thank you. That the LC, for IV's sake, LC is the local council, the leaders at village level. And then the man said, people elect us into these offices and then they think we know. I found that very telling. People, a politician, I mean, this might sound, a little crazy or something like that. A politician has political office, and the political office has leadership requirements and stuff like that, all right? But a politician's primary concern is probably getting services to his people so that he can get elected basically next year. So that's not necessarily a good model for a leader, all right? Okay? But if we have leaders, we need to help train them. And sometimes that also happens the same in the church space as well. If we've got people that have got leadership, politics and stuff like that, we need to have the humility, the church and church leaders and people of NGOs, instead of sometimes seeing things differently, working together. Leadership. All right. I'll talk a little bit about the children in terms of leadership. Church level. How much attention do we pay to Sunday school? How much attention do we pay to Sunday school? In our countries, we really don't do much. We've left this cultural concept of children should be seen and not heard. Kind of, even though we don't say that, we give them the least effort, all right, and the least investments. In those sorts of countries, I read a book and just talk about scenario planning, and they had a quotation about Shell. And they say some of those companies send their scientists to the school fairs because the scientists and planners are now hearing, what is this generation? What are they thinking? Because how this generation is thinking is going to drive the products next year, in the years to come. Fashion, tastes, and stuff like that. That's how these people think, all right? How can we get to that level, all right? And part of that is going to be how we, train ourselves, to read and get exposed. I'll say this, only confident people can groom. Only confident people can grow. So many of us in our societies are struggling from some kind of complexes. And sometimes we don't know them, and sometimes we're protected and shielded by what we call hierarchy. And we don't get to break those down. And I'm saying so many of our people in our societies, and I'm including church there as well. But some even the churches, they don't have succession plans for the same reason. We've got our frailties, we've got our weaknesses. May God help us know how to address those. But the leadership question, and that's right. I said, that I'll die on that one. Our challenge is leadership. It is leadership. Succession planning, where's the country going? Where's your organization going? Where's this? You had how, you had George's example of Shell. Where is your church going? Does your even domestic level, does the wife know where the family is going? Some of those sorts of things also come to that level. So you get your leadership, I'll keep going. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George. George Okello, Opio, few questions for you, very briefly. Someone here who is in charge of developing a culture of service excellence in an organization. They're starting out as a consultant. They're trying to figure out what would be your advice for them to begin to try and develop a culture of service excellence. And then finally, we'll finish with you, Ivy, to get a parting thought on how do we start skilling our children early enough? Is it too late to start promoting skilling in schools? So for example, can we say that every child in school by age 10 should be able to make a chapati? Chapati is a common form of food here in Uganda. Can we say that by the time they finish high school, every child should be able to at least make a chair? Is that something that that would work, that can help us? So you will answer that, and then also do us the honors of finishing our session with a closing prayer before I tell us a little bit about what's happening tomorrow. But let's start with you, George Okello, Opio, in terms of someone who is starting out as a consultancy, and it's quite a number of people actually who are thinking, I want to go into the space where I can be able to build a culture of excellence in my workplace. How do I go about doing that?
Thank you very much, Ben. It has been a wonderful evening. First of all, I think before you think of building a culture, it is good to understand what culture you have. So it is imperative that a culture assessment is done so that you appreciate what is there. Now, in many organizations, you find that especially many organizations these days, we recruit people from different cultures. And sometimes you find a number of cultures exist in one organization. So before you think of building a culture, you need first to understand the culture that you have. Two, once you also do that, it will also help you to know how to approach development of the culture that you need. Because the perspective that you will take, you need first to do an assessment. I think that's the starting point. And once you have done that, it will be able to, you can come up with the interventions to address the specific culture that you want to fix. In other words, you need to create a unified culture. If you are talking about something, it should be the same for everybody in the organization. And once you have a uniform culture, then you will achieve the service excellence that you need. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Ivy. Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I think one key thing, Ben, is let's get involved in the schooling system. I personally thought I came to this realization too late. So I volunteered to serve in the school. I volunteered to speak to the leader of the school occasionally and give her ideas of how we can make the school better. She doesn't need to pay me for it, but my kids go to school there. And I came to this realization too late. I think all of us, if we get interested beyond going to PTA, if you have an idea to say, how about organizing a trip for the children to see how farming works or how cocoa is turned into chocolate, get involved, influence, serve on the school board, because there's a war on our children. And if we stay passive, it would catch us unawares. So I would say involvement, and influence in a very respectful but also courageous manner. You've asked me to pray for us to end the session, and I'm grateful to do that. And I kindly ask us to bow our heads in prayer for prayer. So Lord, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for Africa. And we thank you that the human resource in Africa is a resource that can turn the continent's transformation and growth. Thank you that our ancestry traced back to you. We evolved from you because you created us in your image. And we affirm that for every African child, that they are created by God. And thank you that you created Africa for a purpose. And we pray that you redeem the continent, And we pray, Lord, that you redeem the nations of Africa. And we pray that you redeem families. And Lord, we pray that you redeem us, that in the end you find us faithful. Bless us, Lord, with wisdom. And bless us with your spirit, that we will forge ahead, that in our corners, in our little places, we will transform one person at a time. Equip us, O Lord, even in these times. In the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Ben, you're muted. Ben, unmute.
Yeah, thank you very much. This technology things and what they do to us, eh? But also I think it's because of load shedding that happens in our minds when you go towards 10 p.m. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys tomorrow, day 5. Very exciting panel that we have coming up. One to look forward to. We're going to be having some discussions around mobilizing sustainable finance and capital to invest and transform Africa, but also what investment options might be available for you on infrastructure financing and trade in Africa. And we've got some wonderful, wonderful speakers whom I know very well. You're going to be looking forward to seeing these guys. Joel Aita, we've got David Wadera, who is ED at Absa Bank. We've got Kak Reti from South Africa, Mrs. Priscilla Seruka, who has been in the microfinance space for literally forever. And so there should be some wonderful discussions. Make sure you do share this with other people who you think might want to be a part of this new WhatsApp groups. I know all of us are on average in maybe 40 or 50 different WhatsApp groups. Please do pick up the links in the description and in the chat room and share those with your different WhatsApp groups. Also, we will have some breakout rooms now, and you can be able to catch those in the chat and pick them and join them and go and continue the discussion, not only here, but also online. Otherwise, on behalf of my program manager, Emma Osanga, President Paul Wafula, the entire technical team, Benjamin Macheli, and the rest of the guys who are behind the scenes, making sure we have a wonderful week. My name is Benwe. I want to say God bless you and God bless Africa. Have a wonderful night and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The world is sinking, but Africa is rising. It's time for Africa to turn the tide of political conflict, economic uncertainty, and moral decadence. The time is now for Africa to arise and rebuild. Inspire E-Conference 2023 will give you the tools and strategies to be part of Africa's rebuild. Join us online this August from Monday the 7th to Saturday the 12th from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. East African time as we gather the brightest minds across the continent to discuss the rebuilding of Africa. Book your slot today and be part of the movement that will change Africa forever. Africa, arise and build.